What if Harry was raised by Killmonger in Oakland as a Wakandan warrior AT age 6? A Harry Potter x Marvel Black Panther crossover in 7 chapters. The sun will never set on the Wakandan Empire. Njadaka, called Killmonger Chapter 1 Little Winging, 1986. Eric Stevens, who in another life would have been called Njadaka, son of Njabu, prince of the Golden Tribe, walked down Privet Drive at 6 minutes past 11 in the evening with both hands loose at his sides, and a $30,000 Wakandan ring blade folded under the inside of his belt where the metal would not catch streetlight. It had taken him 8 months to get to this street. 8 months ago he had been in Mogadishu, finishing a contract on a Soviet quartermaster for $250,000 and a passport he did not need. He had received the cable in his Berlin safe house on a Tuesday. The cable came from a man in Cairo who owed him a favor from Beirut. The cable said, "A child survived something in England. The record sealed. Magic involved." Eric had read the cable twice. He had then folded it in half and burned it in the bathroom sink and watched the ash circle the drain. He had said one word in Kosa, which was the word his father had taught him meant both luck and curse depending on which way the speaker meant it. And then he had begun to make a series of telephone calls that would, in their compounding way, end with him here in this street that smelled of cut hedges and cheap petrol, looking at a house with a number 4 nailed to a door painted the color of a politician's tooth. There was a magical world. He had confirmed it himself in a public house in Edinburgh in February, with a half-dead squib drunk on potato wine who had answered Eric's questions for £40 and a glass of something stronger than he had ordered. There had been a war. There was a child who had ended it. The child had been hidden. The hiding, it turned out, had been incompetent. The hiding had been one Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, who had decided that a wizard child should be raised by the only blood family he had. And the only blood family he had was the sister of his murdered mother, who hated everything magical with the small, vehement, household management hatred of a woman who had grown up in the shadow of a more interesting sister. Eric knew this because Eric had spent 6 weeks doing what Eric did, which was watching. He had watched Vernon Dursley back his Vauxhall out of the drive at 8:15 each morning. He had watched Petunia Dursley take her son to a private nursery and her nephew to a state nursery, and pick them up in different cars at different times. He had watched the boy Dudley receive an ice cream and the boy Harry receive a slap on the back of the head for asking for one. He had watched the cupboard. The cupboard, Eric thought, with a certain professional appreciation for how completely human beings will reveal themselves when they think no one is keeping score, was the thing that decided it, not the slaps. Not the leftover sandwiches, the cupboard, the closing of a door on a child, the fact that the door had a latch on the outside. He had grown up in Oakland in a 1-bedroom apartment with a body on the floor and a ring on the body's finger. And he had survived that in some sense of the word survival. And he had built himself afterward out of textbooks and marine selection courses and joint special operations command files and the kind of patience that lets a man wait 9 years to put the first piece on the board. The cupboard, though. The cupboard was what his father would have called the small thing. Njabu had said in one of the conversations Eric still played in his head like a tape that had warped but never broken, that you knew a society by what it did to children when it thought no one was looking. Eric knew this society. He had watched it for 6 weeks. He stopped at the gate of number 4. The hedges were trimmed flat. There was a stone gnome by the path with a chipped nose. A light was on upstairs, blue and flickering, which Eric recognized as the dying glow of a small television set being watched in bed. Vernon Dursley liked the late football reports. Petunia Dursley liked the Antiques Roadshow, which had not aired on a Tuesday at this hour, which meant Vernon was up alone. Eric unlatched the gate. The hinge did not squeak. He had oiled it 3 nights ago. He walked the path. He walked it slowly because he had nothing to hurry for and because hurrying made noise. He listened to the house the way his ranger instructor had taught him to listen to a house, which was to say not for sound but for the absence of sound, the breathing of a building, the small clicks of a settling pipe, the difference between sleep and waiting. The Dursley house was sleeping. He drew the ring blade from inside his belt. The Wakandan ring blade was a single piece of unalloyed vibranium worked into a half-moon with a handle braided in cured zebra hide. It did not gleam. Vibranium did not gleam. Vibranium absorbed. Eric had 2 such blades. The other was at the base of his spine. The lock on the Dursleys' front door was a 5-pin tumbler. Eric did not pick it. He had not come to perform a burglary. He drew from his inside pocket a small device the size of a matchbox, with 3 studs of black metal and 1 of bone. He placed it against the door at the level of the bolt. He pressed the bone stud. There was a sound which was not a sound but rather the temporary cessation of certain frequencies of sound, and then the bolt slid back as if oiled. The Kimoyo lock key had been his father's. It was a piece of Wakandan engineering older than the United States. It could open any lock made by a hand that did not understand sound. Eric opened the door. The house smelled of bleached carpet and cooking fat and shoe polish. He stood in the hallway for 1 full minute, eyes closed, listening. A clock ticked in the kitchen. A pipe complained somewhere upstairs. From the cupboard under the stairs, a child breathed in a way that was not the breath of sleep but the breath of holding still. The child was awake. Erik turned to the cupboard. There was a latch on the outside. There was a deadbolt below the latch. He slid the deadbolt back without sound. He lifted the latch without sound. He opened the door. The boy inside the cupboard sat upright on a mattress the width of a coffin lid. He was small. He was very small, Erik thought. He was much smaller than a 6-year-old ought to have been, even an English 6-year-old, who Erik knew from observation tended toward the narrow. The boy's hair was black and stood out from his head as if he had been struck by lightning, which Erik considered was not impossible. There was a half-moon cut on the boy's forehead. The boy was looking up at him. The boy was not afraid. The boy was being still, which was a thing Erik understood instantly and well, having been still himself in a 1-bedroom apartment in Oakland with a body on the floor. "Get your shoes," Erik said quietly. The boy did not move. The boy was assessing him. Erik recognized the assessment. He let it happen. "You ain't going back in that cupboard," Erik said. "Not tonight, not ever. You got shoes." The boy nodded very slowly. "Get 'em." The boy reached into the corner of the cupboard. He produced a pair of trainers 2 sizes too big for him with the laces tied in knots where the original laces had broken. He put them on. He did not need to lace them. They were already so loose they could be stepped into. "Coat." The boy shook his head. Erik took off his own coat, which was a black canvas field jacket that had been to Sarajevo twice, and dropped it over the boy's shoulders. The coat came down past the boy's knees. The boy looked at the inside of the coat, which was lined in a pattern of red and black geometry that Erik had stitched himself. And Erik saw the boy's eyes move along the pattern, and the boy looked up at him again, and the boy said in a voice that came out of a throat that had not been used much that day, "That's not English." Erik blinked once. Then he allowed himself the first quarter of a smile he had allowed himself in 3 months. "No," he said, "it ain't." "What is it?" "It's the script of a country," Erik said, "that you and me are going to go to one day. You ready?" The boy looked at the cupboard. Then he looked up the stairs where the blue television flicker was still alive. Then he looked at Erik. Then he said very quietly, with the small, precise economy of a child who had learned that words were expensive, "Are you going to hurt them?" Erik considered the question. He considered lying. He considered the long career of lies and the way they tended to compound on a man like interest on a loan he had never wanted to take out. He decided in the way he made all of the important decisions of his life, which was quickly and without permission from anyone, that he would tell the truth to this child for the rest of his natural life. "Yes," he said. "Okay," the boy said. "You want to wait outside?" The boy thought about this. Erik watched him think. The boy's face did a thing, a small ratcheting thing, like a lock setting. Erik had seen the same face on militiamen in El Salvador the moment before they discovered they were willing to do something they had not believed they were willing to do. "No," the boy said. "I want to watch." Erik did not smile this time. The thing in his chest moved sideways instead, which he could not name, but which he would later in Oakland in the kitchen at 4 in the morning with the boy asleep in the next room, recognize as a kind of grief for the boy he himself had been, who had never been given the option to watch. "All right, little man," Erik said. "Stand behind me. Don't make a sound. When I tell you to close your eyes, you close them. Understand?" "Yes." "Good." Erik went up the stairs. The boy followed him. The stairs did not creak because Erik had walked the stairs 3 nights ago in his stocking feet and identified the 2 boards that complained and stepped around them. The boy behind him copied his footfalls without instruction. Erik registered this and stored it. At the top of the landing, Erik turned left. He passed Dudley's bedroom, which was open by 6 inches, and from which came the sound of a child who had eaten too much pudding sleeping like a fed dog. Erik did not enter that room. He did not lay a hand on the cousin. The cousin was 8 years old and had done nothing that the cousin had not been instructed to do. He went to the master bedroom door. He laid one palm flat against it and listened. Vernon Dursley was awake. Vernon Dursley was watching the television and eating something by the wet sounds of his mouth that had been wrapped in cellophane. Petunia was asleep. Erik had counted her breaths from the hallway. Erik opened the door. Vernon looked up. Vernon's face did the thing Erik had been counting on, which was the slow lateral travel of a fat man's mind from the certainty of his own house to the impossibility of an intruder in it. Vernon's mouth was open. There was a streak of meat paste on his chin. He was holding a sandwich. Erik closed the door behind himself and the boy. "Wah," Vernon began. Erik laid one finger to his lips. The Wakandan ring blade hung at his side, perfectly still, perfectly black, drinking the light of the bedside lamp. You don't shout, Erik said conversationally, or I gut your wife while she dreams. Understand me? Vernon Dursley understood him. The understanding moved across Vernon Dursley's face like a stain on a tablecloth. Vernon Dursley nodded. Put the sandwich down. Vernon put the sandwich down on the bedside table. A piece of cucumber slid out. You know who I am? Vernon shook his head. Good. Means the work was clean. Erik allowed himself this. He took 2 steps into the bedroom. He let Vernon see the boy in his enormous black field jacket and his 2 big trainers with the white scar of the half-moon on the forehead. You know who that is? Vernon's mouth worked. Out loud. That's the bee. Vernon's voice cracked. He tried again. That's the boy. That's my boy now, Erik said. Say it. He's your... Vernon's brain was, Erik could see, beginning to grasp the full shape of what was happening. And Vernon's brain did not want to grasp it, and Vernon's brain was therefore trying to retreat into the kind of indignation that had worked on petunias and salesmen and small frightened wizards for 46 years. Now look here, Vernon said, his voice climbing. I don't know who you think you... Erik moved. He had warned the boy. He had not warned Vernon. Vernon did not deserve a warning. Vernon had warned no one in the cupboard. The ring blade described a half-moon in the air. It did not gleam. It did not sing. It went through the front of Vernon's larynx and out the back of his neck and embedded itself in the headboard of the bed. And Vernon Dursley's hands came up, slow, fat, surprised hands, and tried to find the place where his throat had been and could not. And Vernon sat there on the bed for approximately 4 seconds with his eyes wide and the sandwich grease shining on his chin, and then Vernon went over sideways into his wife, who did not wake up. Because Erik had blown a small powder into the room from the Kimoyo lock key 6 minutes earlier, which was a Wakandan compound used in the interrogation of high-value targets who needed to be uncertain about what they had witnessed. Petunia would witness nothing. Erik turned to the boy. The boy was standing exactly where Erik had told him to stand, 2 paces behind him. The boy was looking at Vernon. The boy's face had not moved. Close your eye. The boy closed his eyes. Erik finished the work. The work was in its way mercy. Petunia Dursley had been a woman who had latched the door of a cupboard on her dead sister's son and gone to bed each night with a clean conscience, because the conscience had nothing on it she had ever bothered to write. Erik did not torture her, he simply ended the breathing. The compound had already made it the most peaceful thing she had ever done. He retrieved the ring blade. He wiped it on the corner of the duvet, which was beige with a print of small purple flowers. He folded the blade back into the inside of his belt. Open, the boy opened his eyes. He looked at the bed. He looked for perhaps 2 seconds, then he looked back at Erik. What about Dudley? The boy said. Dudley sleeps. Erik said, I ain't got business with him. The boy considered this. The boy looked for one moment exactly 6 years old, then the look passed. All right, the boy said. Erik wanted briefly and ferociously to put his hand on the boy's head. He did not. He had not earned that yet. He had not earned anything. Come on, he said instead. We got a car. They went down the stairs. They did not stop at the cupboard. The boy looked at the cupboard once, the way a man looks at the prison cell he is being released from, which is to say with a measured, unsurprised contempt. Then he walked past it and did not look back. In the kitchen on the refrigerator was a wedding photograph of Vernon and Petunia. Erik paused at it. He took it down. He removed the photograph from the frame. He folded the frame in half against his knee, which was a thing the average man could not do because the frame was steel, but Erik was not an average man and his knee had been broken twice and rebuilt with a steel pin himself. He left the broken frame on the counter as a courtesy to the police. He kept the photograph. Why? The boy said from the door. You ever want to know what they looked like? Erik said, you'll be able to look. I don't believe in pretending the dead never existed. That's how they come back to haunt you. The boy considered this. The boy nodded. They walked out. Erik closed the front door behind them. He did not lock it. The door's job was done. The car was a 1982 Ford Sierra 2 streets over, paid for in cash to a man in Watford who had not asked Erik's name and who had been very grateful for the cash. Erik opened the passenger door. The boy looked at the seat. The seat was too high for him. Erik lifted him in. The boy did not flinch at being lifted. Erik registered this and stored it. He buckled the boy in. He went around. He got in the driver's side. He started the car. The engine caught on the first turn. He looked at the boy. The boy was looking out the windshield at Privet Drive. The street lamp turned the boy's profile into a small pale silhouette against the glass. What's your name? Erik said. The boy did not turn his head. Harry, the boy said. Harry Potter. They didn't call me Harry. They called me boy and freak, mostly freak. You know what they called me growing up? The boy turned his head. Erik said. Erik Stevens. But that ain't my name either. My name is Njadaka, son of Njabu of the Golden Tribe of Wakanda. The other name I had to use because the country wouldn't let me have my own. Wakanda, you'll learn. Erik put the car in gear. He pulled away from the curb. He drove the speed limit. He did not look back at Privet Drive because there was nothing on Privet Drive that would ever again be relevant to the rest of his life. The boy was quiet for a long time. They were on the motorway somewhere west of London before the boy spoke again. "Are you taking me to America?" "Yeah." "Why?" Erik considered the question. He considered the long answer, which involved Cairo and the cable and the squib in Edinburgh and Njabu, and the body on the floor and the ring in the floorboard, and the kid he had been who had taught himself to read 3 languages on the floor of an apartment over a Chinese laundry on Telegraph Avenue. He gave the short answer. "Because somebody should have come for me," he said, "and nobody did. And I decided when I was your age that if I ever got the power to come for somebody, I would." The boy was quiet again. "I have a question," the boy said. "Ask it. The thing in the wedding photograph, the frame, you broke it with your knee. People can't do that. Some people can." "Why?" Erik smiled in the dark of the car. The smile was small. It had teeth in it. "Because some people, little man, are not from the country they've been told they from. Some people are from a country that taught them how to break frames, and how to break worse things too, worse and better. You with me?" The boy nodded, slowly, then more firmly. "Yes," he said. "All right, Harry Potter," said Erik Stevens, who had been Njadaka, son of Njabu, prince of the Golden Tribe of Wakanda, and who was now also, by his own self-declared right, a father. "Then welcome home." They drove west into the dark toward a private airfield outside Bristol, where a Cessna 421 was waiting with a pilot who owed Erik a favor from Beirut, with a flight plan filed under a false name, with a passport in the boy's jacket pocket that said his name was Kari Stevens, age 6, traveling with his guardian. By the time the sun rose over Privet Drive and a milkman discovered that the Dursleys' front door was unlocked, and the cupboard under the stairs was empty, and the master bedroom contained 2 corpses and no obvious cause, the airplane was over the Atlantic, and Harry Potter, with the half-moon scar on his forehead and a strange black coat pulled around him like a flag of a country he had not yet seen, was asleep against the shoulder of a man who had not slept beside another human being in 12 years, and who would not, that night, sleep at all. Outside the cabin, the ocean rolled black and Atlantic, and somewhere far behind them in a tower in Scotland, a silver instrument shaped like a small pair of scales tipped slightly to one side, and an old man with a long white beard frowned in his sleep, and dreamed, without knowing why, of the city of Oakland, which he had never visited and which he would never visit, and which had just acquired one new resident. The instrument did not tell the old man this. It only tipped. On the airplane over the Atlantic, Erik Stevens did not sleep. He sat across from the boy in the small cabin of the Cessna 421 and watched the boy's chest rise and fall under the lined field jacket. He watched the way the boy's hands had curled in sleep into the position of someone braced for impact. He watched the way the boy did not move when the airplane hit a brief patch of turbulence over the mid-Atlantic ridge. He watched the way the boy did not wake when the pilot, a quiet man from Sao Paulo named Aurelio, whom Erik had once carried 6 kilometers out of a firefight outside Beirut, came back to ask whether the passenger required a blanket. "He requires," Erik said softly, "everything. He just don't know yet what to ask for. Bring the blanket." The blanket was brought. Erik laid it over the boy with the slow, careful precision of a man who did not entirely trust his own hands not to crush a thing the size of a child by accident. The boy did not stir. Aurelio looked at Erik. Aurelio said in Portuguese, "You did the thing in London then." "I did the thing in London, and this is the consequence of the thing. This is the reason for the thing." Aurelio considered the boy. Aurelio considered Erik. Aurelio said in Portuguese, "I have 3 children, Erik. I have a wife. I have a small house outside below Horizont. I will say to you what my father once said to me on the day my eldest was born, which is the same thing he said to my younger brothers when their children were born, because he was a man of consistent sayings." "What did he say?" "He said, the body of a man does not belong to himself again after this moment. The body of a man belongs to the child until the child can carry his own body. Sometimes longer, often longer. You make peace with this now, or you spend 10 years making peace with it and damaging the child the whole time. You with me?" Erik looked at the boy. "I am with you," he said. "Good," Aurelio said. "I will not charge you for this flight. I will pay you anyway." "I will not accept." "You will accept. The money is the boy's money, not mine. It comes from his vault, and if you do not accept it, you insult his right to pay for his own passage. You with me?" Aurelio considered this. Aurelio nodded slowly. "I am with you," he said. "Set it under the cushion. I will pretend I did not see it." "You always pretend you did not see the things you saw, Aurelio. It is the only useful skill I have in my line of work. Get me a coffee." Aurelio got him a coffee. The coffee was strong. Erik drank it standing, with one hand on the bulkhead, looking down at the boy. The boy did not wake. The boy did not wake until they were over Newfoundland. The boy woke once briefly and looked at Erik and looked at the small window of the cabin, beyond which a thin band of dawn was beginning to climb the dark side of the world. The boy looked at the dawn. The boy said, "It's the same dawn." What? It's the same dawn, the dawn in England and the dawn in America. It comes from the same sun. I always wondered if the sun was different in different countries. Aunt Petunia said America had a different sun. She said the sun was meaner. She said the men who got sunburned there got it because the sun knew they were ugly. Aunt Petunia was a fool. The sun is the sun. The men are the men. Yes, go back to sleep, little man. I'm not tired. You are tired. You are running on the kind of fuel that don't show up till you stop. Go back to sleep. The boy closed his eyes. The boy did not perhaps sleep, but the boy was still, and the stillness was, for that morning, enough. Erik sat across from him. Erik watched the dawn come up over the Atlantic. Erik thought about the long curve of his life and the curve's two bends, and the second bend being the one he had not seen coming, which had taken place at 12 minutes past 11 in the evening on Privet Drive in Little Winging in Surrey, and which was named, by his quiet internal naming, the boy in the cupboard. He had not, until that bend, understood that he had been a man waiting his whole life for a thing he could not have named. He had not understood that the rage he had been carrying since the kitchen floor in Oakland had been a rage on behalf of the boy he himself had been, who could not be reached, who could not be rescued, who was already gone. He had not understood that the only door out of that rage was a door he did not even know was there until he opened a cupboard under some stranger's stairs and found a small body behind it that did not, in any visible way, belong to him. He understood it now. He understood that this had been the door. He set the coffee down. He laid his hand very lightly on the boy's foot through the blanket. The boy did not move. Erik did not either for a long time while the dawn came up. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The apartment over the laundry. The apartment was on the third floor of a 4-story building on Telegraph Avenue, above a Chinese laundry that ran 6 days a week and 1 block from the BART station at MacArthur. The street smelled in the morning of starch and bus exhaust, and on Sundays of the panaderia 2 doors down, which baked conchas and pan dulce in an oven that vented onto the alley. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a green linoleum floor that buckled in one corner, a living room with a window that looked over Telegraph, and one of those iron fire escapes that San Francisco filmmakers in the 70s had used to suggest urban menace and which now suggested, depending on the angle of the morning sun, urban hope. Erik had owned the apartment for 11 years. He had purchased it in cash through a shell corporation in Delaware when he was 20 years old, using money he had earned in 2 tours in Afghanistan and several afterwards that did not have official names. He had not lived in it more than 6 weeks at a stretch in those 11 years. He had paid the property taxes from a credit union in Berkeley under a different name. The apartment had been Njabu's. The apartment was where his father had been killed. The apartment was where Erik had found the ring. The apartment was the only thing in the world Erik Stevens had ever loved that he had been able to keep. Now there was a child in it. The child was sitting on the green linoleum, cross-legged, in clothes that were 2 sizes too big. Erik had bought them in a hurry at a Sears 2 days before, picking the smallest of everything and still finding it too large, and the child was looking at a book. The book was bound in leather the color of dried tobacco. The book was 41 years old. It had been printed in Wakanda in the period after the Second World War when Njabu's father had been a war dog, and it was titled in the Wakandan script the boy had recognized in the lining of Erik's field jacket, but underneath in smaller letters in English it said, "On the necessity of Vibration and the nature of nations." The boy was reading the English title with his lips moving slightly. "You read," Erik said. The boy looked up. He had a piece of pan dulce in one hand. He had eaten a third of it in the last 15 minutes, the rest he was apparently saving. The boy said, "Aunt Petunia didn't like me reading Dudley's books." "Why?" "She said it was showing off." Erik filed this. He sat down on the kitchen floor opposite the boy, which made him eye level with the boy, which he had decided 2 days ago was the way conversations between them would be conducted whenever the boy was on the floor. He set down 2 cups of mate, which he had taught the boy to drink that morning with sugar, because he believed children should be permitted sugar in moderation, and also because he had no patience with the English habit of giving children weak tea. "That book in your hand," Erik said, "how much you got?" "It says the title, and on necessity of vibranium, and the nature of nations." "What's a nation?" The boy paused. He had not been asked an open question in some time. The asking itself was strange. "A country," the boy said uncertainly. "That's one answer. That's the English answer. Tell me the answer the book gives. Open it." Chapter 1. The boy opened the book. The pages were thick and the ink had aged into the paper. The boy was holding the book like an artifact, which Erik noted with approval because it was an artifact, but also like a thing that might bite him, which Erik noted with a different feeling, which was not approval and not disapproval, but a kind of slow, patient anger at the people who had taught the boy to expect every object to punish him. The English is small, the boy said, and the other writing is big. I don't know the other writing. You'll learn, read me the English. The boy read. He read haltingly. He read with the careful enunciation of a child who has been hit for getting words wrong. Erik did not correct him. Erik let him stumble. Erik watched him work. A nation, the boy read, is not a piece of land. It is a covenant between those who share a destiny. The destiny is a choice. The land merely is the place where the choice is kept. The boy looked up. What's a covenant? A promise, bigger than a promise you make and your great-great-grandkids gotta keep. The kind of promise gets passed down in the blood, and the blood, when it knows what's good for it, keeps. Did England make a promise? England made a lot of promises. England broke most of them. Erik sipped the mate. Wakanda made one promise. Wakanda has kept it for 4,000 years. What was the promise? Never to be conquered. The boy considered this. The boy had a particular way of considering, Erik had noticed over the 4 days he had been in the apartment, which was that he turned the consideration in his mind the way a child might turn a stone, looking at it from several angles before deciding to put it in his pocket. Is England a nation? The boy said. By the book's definition, Erik said, England is a kingdom, different thing. A kingdom is a listen, you keep reading, we come back to that. You read me 3 more pages and I'll tell you about your mother. The boy stopped breathing for half a second. My mother, yeah. My Aunt Petunia said she was a worthless drunk and she died in a car crash because the father couldn't drive. Aunt Petunia, Erik said, was a liar with the small, dim imagination of people who hate what they don't understand. Aunt Petunia is also dead, so she don't get to tell that story no more. The story from now on is the true story. The true story is that your mother and your father were murdered in their own house, in a war that your mother and father were on the winning side of, and they were murdered by a coward who came in the night with a wand. And the coward died and you didn't because your mother loved you so much she put her own body in front of the killing thing. You with me? The boy did not move. Out loud. Yes, the boy said. You ever ask Aunt Petunia how the scar got on your face? Once. What she said? She said it was from the car crash. She said the father that my dad was driving drunk. It wasn't a car crash, it was a curse. A curse is a listen. Magic is real, you know that. You did some of it. The neighbor saw you on the roof of the school one time, that's in the records, you got up there because you was running from your cousin. That's magic. It comes out of you when you're scared. It's gonna come out of you whether you want it or not for now, but I'm gonna teach you to control it. There's gonna be a school, I'll tell you about the school, but first you got a name and a story. The name is Harry James Potter, James for your father. The story is your mother was a witch and your father was a wizard and they had a wand each and they fought a war. What war? Same war that's still going. The war ain't over. The coward came back in a way. It's quiet now, but the man ain't dead, not all the way. We'll get to that. The school will get to that. What you need to know now is that your mother was Lily Evans, sister of the woman in the cupboard house, but Lily Evans was a different kind of woman. Lily Evans was a witch. She married James Potter, who was a wizard and rich and brave, and listen, I'm gonna be honest with you, your father was a little bit of a fool, but a fool of the kind that means well. There's worse kinds. Erik watched the boy's face. The boy's face had gone perfectly still. The boy was not crying. The boy had not, Erik suspected, learned crying in front of other people as a possibility. Erik filed this. He would have to teach the boy that crying was permitted. They had money, Erik went on in the same flat tone. Your father's family had money. There's an account in a magical bank in London. It's got your name on it. We'll get it. There's a house, there's a vault, there's books, there's a wand somewhere in that vault. We'll get all of it, but you don't need any of that to be who you are. You with me? Yes. What's your name? Harry James Potter. Good. That's the name you keep because it's the one your mother gave you and your mother died for it and you don't disrespect that. But you got another name now, too. The boy looked up. You ready? Yes. Your other name is Kari Njadaka. Kari means crown in one of the languages of my people. Njadaka was the name of my father and his father's father. By the customs of Wakanda, when a man takes another man's son into his house, he gives him part of his name. That's the part I'm giving you. The crown part you got on your own. I just recognized it. You with me? The boy's mouth had opened a little. Kari Njadaka, he said. That's right. Why a crown? Erik shrugged. He drank his mate. Because I saw the way you looked at the cupboard, he said. When you walked past it, you ever heard the saying, you don't owe nothing to no cage you walked out of? You walked out of yours like you didn't owe it nothing. You walked out of it like a king, so I named you for it. The boy looked at his hands. The boy had small, scratched-up hands. He looked at them as if he had not previously known what to do with them. All right, the boy said. All right, what? All right, sir. Don't call me sir. What do I call you? Erik thought about this. He had not thought about it. He had been calling himself Erik in the boy's hearing because he had not yet decided. Baba, he said, that's an old word from the south of my country. It just means father. You don't gotta use it if you don't want. The boy nodded. The boy did not say it. Erik did not require him to. Read me the next page, Erik said. I gotta start dinner. He stood, he went to the stove, he turned on the front burner. He took out a cast iron skillet that had been his mother's and a bag of long grain rice and a jar of peanut butter and an onion and a packet of stew meat from the refrigerator and began to chop the onion. The chopping was fast. The boy watched the chopping with interest. The knife was an Ayagami super carbon steel that Erik had bought in a market in Yokohama in 1983. The boy read aloud. The boy stumbled and Erik did not correct. The boy paused to ask what an oligarchy was and Erik told him in the time it took him to brown the onion. The boy paused to ask what a colony was and Erik told him in the time it took him to brown the meat. By the time the rice was on, the boy had read 14 pages and asked the meaning of 9 words, and Erik had taught him each one in the simplest direct sentences he could find. When the food was ready, Erik served it on 2 plates. The dish was groundnut stew over rice. The boy looked at it. Is that allowed? Is what allowed? Peanuts with meat. You eat what tastes good. You don't ask permission. You with me? Yes. Eat. The boy ate. The boy ate as if he had not been permitted to taste food in some time. He ate without speaking. He finished the plate and Erik served him a second plate and the boy ate that too. Erik watched him eat. Erik did not eat himself for the first 15 minutes. He was occupied. When the boy was done, the boy said, "Why did my mother and father die and I didn't?" "Because your mother put her body between you and the curse. The curse used her up. Then the curse turned to you and your mother had done some kind of old magic that made the curse stop and bounce back. The curse fed on her love for you," is how the wizards say it. They like to talk about love like it's a substance. Maybe it is, I don't know yet. The magical world will know more about when we get there. But the short of it is your mother bought your life with hers. You with me? Yes, that means a thing. You know what it means, that I owe her. The boy looked up. The boy had been ready for the lecture. The lecture was not what came. You don't owe her shit, Erik said. She didn't pay so you'd carry the debt. She paid so you'd be free of it. A mother who gives her life for her child don't give it to be paid back. She gives it because that's the price the world asked her and she paid it. What you owe is to live. Live big, live free, live for things that matter, don't waste it. That's all. You with me? The boy looked at the plate. The plate was empty. Yes, look at me. The boy looked at him. You don't owe nothing to nobody who died for you. That's how love works. The dead released you. The cupboard people locked you up. You owe the cupboard people exactly the dust I left on the floor. You owe your mother to live. There's a difference, you hear me? The boy was crying. Erik registered it without comment. He let the boy cry. He did not move from the stove. He waited. The boy cried for 2 minutes, perhaps 3. The boy then wiped his face on the cuff of the field jacket. He had not let Erik take it back. He had been wearing it for 4 days. Erik had given up trying and the boy said, "Yes, Baba." Erik did not move. The word had landed in the room like a coin dropped on linoleum. It rang. "All right," Erik said. "Eat the rest of the bread. We got work." After dinner, Erik took out the box. The box was a Wakandan case the size of a small steamer trunk that he had shipped from a safe deposit box in Geneva 9 days before, and which had arrived that morning, and which contained the things Njabu had left behind. Erik had not opened the box in 11 years. He opened it now. Inside the box was 43 books in Wakandan and English, on history, on politics, on metallurgy, on combat, on agriculture, on the architecture of the city of the dead and the design of the throne room and the lineage of the 5 tribes. There was a folded length of red cloth the size of a flag. There was a wooden statue of a panther 12 inches high carved from a single piece of acacia. There were 3 sets of kimoyo beads, of which 1 set was Erik's already and 2 were spare. There was a folded sheet of paper that had been an architectural drawing of the building above the Chinese laundry, with measurements in Wakandan units made by Njabu for renovations that had not happened. There was a knife. There was the ring. Erik took the ring out. He held it up to the kitchen light. The ring was a band of vibranium engraved with a panther head and the script of the Golden Tribe. It had been Njabu's. It had been Njabu's father's. It had been worn by every male of the line of Njadaka for 9 generations. Erik handed it to the boy. "What is this?" The boy said. "It's the proof," Erik said. "It's the proof of who I am, who you are now by adoption, where we come from. The man who wore it last was my father. The man who killed my father was my father's brother. My father's brother is now the king of Wakanda. The man's name is T'Chaka." The boy turned the ring slowly. The ring caught no light, vibranium absorbed. "Your uncle killed your father." "Yes." "Why?" "Because my father had told me and was going to tell others that the people of Wakanda were not just one tribe, but the heirs of every African slave dragged out of his country in chains, and that the wealth of Wakanda belonged not just to the people inside the borders, but to all the people of the diaspora. Because my father had begun to share Kimoyo beads with men in Oakland who had ideas about how to fight back. Because my father, in short, had told the truth in front of the wrong people. So my uncle came in the night and killed him and went home and let his son inherit a kingdom built on a lie. And the son is going to inherit, and the son don't know any of this. The boy was very quiet. I know, the boy said, you know what? I know what that's like. When I went past the cupboard before we left, I felt like I knew what it was like, what you said, to be born into a lie. Erik did not move for 2 seconds. Then he reached across the box and put his hand briefly on the boy's head. He took it off again. He did not look at the boy. He looked at the ring in the boy's other hand. Yeah, he said, what do? We don't do anything yet. We learn, we train, we get strong, we get smart. When you are 11 years old, we go to Wakanda and I take what's mine, and by mine I mean ours. The boy looked up. All of it, the throne, the vibranium, the intelligence service, the international position, the voice. We take it all and we use it the way my father said it should be used. To free the people who have been waiting 4,000 years for that country to do its job. You with me? The boy held the ring. The boy slipped it onto his thumb. It was too big. The boy slid it back off. Yes, Baba, Erik nodded once. He took out the second item from the box. It was a set of Kimoyo beads. He showed them to the boy. He showed him how the beads connected. He showed him how the prime bead glowed faintly when activated. He fastened a small bracelet of 3 beads, a starter set, to the boy's wrist. This is your communication. This is your library. This is your locator. This is the way I find you if you go missing. You don't take it off, ever. You sleep in it, you bathe in it, you die in it. You with me? Yes, Baba. Good, now we begin Kosa. The first word you learn is the word for hello. The word is Sawubona. It means I see you. It means more than the English. It means the speaker sees the whole of the listener, every part of him, every part he ever was and ever will be. The reply is Yibo Sawubona, I see you too. The point of the greeting is to acknowledge that another person exists in their entirety. You with me? Sawubona, the boy tried. Sawubona. Sawubona Baba. Yibo Sawubona Kari. The boy smiled. It was small. It was perhaps the first real smile he had ever produced in his life. It did not last long, but it was there, on the linoleum floor of the apartment above the Chinese laundry, on the 3rd floor of a building on Telegraph Avenue in Oakland, California, in the 4th day of a new life. Erik turned away from it before the boy could see his face do anything in return. They worked through the night. They worked through the next morning and the next. By the end of the first week, the boy could greet Erik in Kosa. He could count to 10. He could name the 5 tribes, border, mining, merchant, river, Jabari, and explain, in clumsy sentences, the function of each within the Federation. He could not yet read a full page of the Wakandan script, but he could recognize the characters for king, mother, father, and panther. By the end of the second week, he could read children's primers in the script. Erik had ordered them from a smuggler in Casablanca who specialized in moving Wakandan goods to expatriates. They cost more than rent. By the end of the 3rd week, he was reading Njabu's books in English with a Wakandan English dictionary at his elbow, looking up the technical terms, asking Erik to explain the rest. By the end of the 4th week, he had stopped flinching when Erik raised a hand near him. He stopped flinching, Erik noticed. On the morning Erik had been reaching across him to pick up the salt. The boy had not blinked. The boy had not moved. The boy had simply waited. And then the boy had said, "Pass the eggs," and Erik had passed the eggs. And the kitchen had been quiet for a long time. And Erik had gone into the bathroom afterwards and turned on the shower and stood under it for a long time, and the shower had been hot and the bathroom had been steamy. And Erik had been weeping very quietly, the way a man weeps who has learned to do it without sound. He came out. He dried his face. He went back to the kitchen. The boy was reading a book about the agriculture of the river tribe, asking himself in Kosa what the word for cassava was. He looked up when Erik returned. Sawubona Baba, Yibo, Erik said. Sawubona Kari. There were the small adjustments. The small adjustments were the parts of raising a child that no book had prepared Erik for and that no contract had ever required him to think about. They were the parts that the more he encountered them, the more he realized had been the substance of being raised himself. The parts his mother had performed without his ever having seen her perform them. The parts his father had not lived long enough to perform at all. The boy needed a haircut. Erik took him to a barber shop on Telegraph called Henry's, which had been the same shop with the same chair under the same red and white pole since 1957, and which Erik had been getting his own hair cut in for 11 years. Henry, who was now 71 and partially blind in one eye, cut the boy's hair into a small clean line and refused payment. Erik left $20 on the chair. Henry left it on the chair until Erik came back 2 weeks later, at which point Henry returned the $20 and said, "Njadaka, I cut your father's hair in this shop for 14 years. I cut your hair in this shop for 11. I am not going to take money to cut your son's hair. Get out of my shop, son. Come back next month." The boy needed shoes. Erik discovered, after the second pair of trainers from the Sears had blown out at the toe within 4 weeks, that the boy was growing, that the boy had begun, in the safety of the apartment and the regularity of 3 meals a day in the absence of latched doors, to grow at the rate that English doctors would have called catch-up growth, and that Erik would be buying shoes more often than he had budgeted for. He bought the next pair from a Vietnamese man named Mr. Thuan in a small shoe shop on Shattuck. The shoes were leather, they cost $40, the boy wore them out in 5 months, the next pair cost $45. Erik began to set aside $100 a month for the shoes alone, and to keep the money in an envelope marked in Kosa simply, feet. The boy needed sleep. The boy did not in the first 9 months sleep well. The boy woke at small sounds. The boy woke at large sounds. The boy woke particularly at the sound of footsteps in the hall outside the apartment door, even when those footsteps belonged to other tenants and were known to Erik to be benign. Erik began to sleep with his door open so the boy could see from the boy's own door across the hall that Erik was there. This worked, in part. After the first year, the boy began to sleep through the smaller sounds. After the second year, the boy could be left alone for an entire night when Erik went out on a contract, with one of the trusted neighbors checking in. By the third year, the boy slept like a child, which was the milestone Erik had been aiming for, and Erik privately registered as the most important security goal he had ever set himself. The boy needed laughter. Erik had not laughed much in 12 years. Erik discovered, by way of teaching the boy how to laugh, that he himself had forgot. The first time Erik made the boy laugh was an accident. Erik had been making pancakes on a Saturday morning, and Erik had flipped a pancake too hard, and the pancake had landed on top of the refrigerator, and Erik had said something in Kosa that he would later be unable to repeat, and the boy had laughed for 43 seconds. Erik had stood at the stove and listened to the laughter and not laughed himself. Erik had cried again a little, but had cried while flipping the next pancake correctly, and the boy had eaten it, and the boy had asked for another, and Erik had made another. The boy needed permission. The boy in the first 6 months had asked permission for almost every action he took. May I have water? May I use the bathroom? May I read this book? May I open this drawer? Erik had answered yes to each one without comment, on the principle that a child who had been told no for 6 years would heal faster by being told yes than by being told you do not need to ask. After 8 months, the boy had stopped asking for water. After a year, the boy had stopped asking for the bathroom. After 14 months, the boy had stopped asking for books, although he still, before opening any of the rarer or older books in the apartment, would catch Erik's eye and make a small inquiring nod, which Erik would return also as a nod. The drawer permission was the last to go. The drawer permission was still, in fact, a small lingering habit when the boy was 9, when he would, before opening Erik's particular drawer in the kitchen, the one that contained the knife and the kimono dashboard, pause and listen for Erik in the apartment. Erik had thought about telling the boy that the pause was unnecessary. Erik had decided not to. Some habits of caution, Erik thought, were worth keeping in a household that had a knife in the kitchen drawer. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. 5 years on Telegraph Avenue. The boy grew. He grew in a house that had 3 rooms, kitchen, living room, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a fire escape, and a view of Telegraph that on certain Sunday afternoons in October would be filled with a parade for a saint Erik had never heard of and would never ask the name of, because the names of other people's saints were other people's business. He grew in a school he did not attend. Erik had filed paperwork with the Oakland Unified School District declaring the boy a homeschooled minor under the guardianship of Erik N. Stevens, retired Marine Corps, with a P.O. box in Berkeley and a phone number that rang at a service. Erik had bribed the relevant clerk in the relevant office $120. The clerk had filed the paperwork. The boy was therefore, in the eyes of the state of California, a homeschooled minor. In the eyes of his father, the boy was a soldier in training. The training had several departments. There was the language department. By the end of the first year, Harry, who was now called Kari at home, and Harry only in the rare instances when Erik took him out to a diner or a doctor's office, could speak conversational Kosa with the patience of a child who had learned to do most things by listening. By the second year, he could read Njabu's books in the Wakandan script as fluently as the English. By the third year, Erik had begun teaching him spoken Twi, which Njabu had also spoken, and a smattering of Arabic, because Erik believed every educated boy should know how to read a Quran even if he had no use for one. The boy could not write Arabic well, but he could read it for sense. He preferred the script of the Golden Tribe, which curled and bent and was, he had told Erik solemnly at age 8, the most beautiful writing he had ever seen, and Erik had not corrected him, although Erik had thought privately that the Tigrinya script was more beautiful and had merely said, yes. There was the combat department. The combat department took place 6 mornings a week from 4:30 in the morning until 6:30 in the morning, on the roof of the building above the Chinese laundry, which Erik had cleared of debris in the first month and laid down with a 30-foot circle of mats. The mats were dark red. The circle was the Wakandan ring of the warrior caste. Erik had drawn the circumference himself with a compass and a piece of rope tied to a nail. In the first year they did calisthenics. The boy was small. The boy could do in the first month 2.5 push-ups. By the end of the first year he could do 30. In the second year they began the unarmed forms. The unarmed forms of the Dora Milaje were the basis of all Wakandan close combat training, regardless of sex. Erik had been trained in them by his father at the same age, and his father had been trained by his father, and so on for 9 generations. The forms had names that did not translate. The first form was called the crossing of the river. The second was the lion in the reeds. The third was the mother bearing her burden. The boy was a quick study. By his 8th birthday he could perform all 7 forms without error. By his 9th he could perform them with a partner. The partner was Erik. Erik did not hold back beyond the necessary minimum. The boy bruised. The boy did not complain. In the 3rd year they began the spear. The spear was the assegai, which Erik called by its Xhosa name. The spear they used was wooden with a blunted iron tip, the length of the boy's body plus 6 inches. The boy learned to throw it, to parry with it, to use the haft as a staff, to use the butt as a club. He learned the 17 attack lines and the 11 defense lines. He learned, more importantly, when to put the spear down. A weapon, Erik told him on a January morning when the boy was 9 and they were doing knife defense on the roof in cold rain because the cold was useful and the rain was useful, is a thing you use when nothing else will work. A weapon you use first is a weapon you use last. Some men, they pick up a weapon, they think the weapon is the point. The weapon ain't the point. The point is the politics that put you in the room with whoever you got the weapon for. You with me? Yes, Baba. What's the first thing you do before you fight? You see if there's a way out that ain't a fight. What's the second? See if there's a way to make the fight on your terms. What's the third? You fight. What's the fourth? You win. What's the fifth? You let the right ones go. Why? Because killing everybody is an empire's job. You ain't an empire. What are we? A people. Good, run the forms. The boy ran the forms in the cold rain. Erik watched him. Erik corrected him on the 3rd line of the crossing of the river where his weight had drifted to the back foot. The boy corrected. Erik said good. The boy was 9. The boy ran the forms again. There was the ideology department. The ideology department took place at the kitchen table after dinner, 6 nights a week for 90 minutes. Sometimes more when the boy was uncertain and asked questions that interested Erik enough to lose track of the clock. Sometimes less, when Erik was tired from his contract work. He still went out on contracts, perhaps for a year, never longer than 2 weeks, with arrangements made for the boy to stay with one of Erik's 3 trusted neighbors, all of whom were women, all of whom believed Erik was a security consultant for an oil company, and all of whom adored the small, grave, polite boy who came down the hall with his book under his arm, and Erik had cut the lessons short to 20 minutes of summary. The ideology department began with Njabu's books and continued out from them. The boy at age 7 read, alongside the Wakandan texts, The Wretched of the Earth, Fanon, Black Skin, White Masks, Fanon, Discourse on Colonialism, Césaire, the autobiography of Malcolm X, The Souls of Black Folk, A People's History of the United States, which Erik had read in 1982 in a hotel room in Honolulu, and which he believed every American child should read at age 7, though almost none did. The boy at age 8 read Selected Writings of Kwame Nkrumah, Capital Volume 1 in a heavily abridged paperback Erik had bought used, and 2 histories of the Haitian Revolution. The boy at age 9 read The Prince, Machiavelli in Italian-English parallel, because Erik wanted him to understand what the wizard world's enemies had been reading, The Art of War, The Letter from Birmingham Jail, and a slim, dangerous, magnificent book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, by Walter Rodney, which had been published the year Erik was born. The boy at age 10 read, alongside continuing reviews of all of the above, a stack of magical textbooks Erik had a smuggler obtain from the back rooms of Flourish and Blotts in London, including A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration, A History of Magic, 1,000 Magical Herbs and Fungi, and Erik's favorite, the only one he himself sat down and read cover to cover, Hogwarts, A History. There was no department for what they were really doing. There was no name for it. Erik thought of it, when he thought of it at all, as the long preparation. The boy thought of it in the privacy of his own mind, with the precision of a child who had been taught precise words for things, as the project. The project had components. The boy enumerated them to himself in bed before sleep in Xhosa, because doing so in Xhosa was both practice and security. Nobody on Telegraph Avenue spoke Xhosa. The project's components were 1. Become strong, 2. Become wise, 3. Become a king, 4. Be king for the right reasons. The fourth component was the one the boy thought about most often. He had asked Erik about it directly once when he was 9, sitting on the fire escape on a summer evening with the smell of the panaderia coming up the alley and the sound of a Marvin Gaye record drifting from someone's apartment a floor below. Baba, yeah, why do you want to be king? Erik had been smoking. Erik smoked perhaps 3 cigarettes a week, always on the fire escape, always Lucky Strikes without filters. He had taken the cigarette out of his mouth and looked at it for a while. You ain't asking the right question, he had said. What's the right question? The right question is, why do I think the throne shouldn't be where it is, not why do I want to sit on it? Okay. Why do you think the throne shouldn't be where it is? Erik had looked down at the street. A bus had stopped at the corner. A woman in a green coat had gotten off slowly with 2 grocery bags. Because Wakanda has the most advanced civilization on this planet, he had said, and Wakanda has done absolutely nothing with it. Wakanda has watched its brothers and sisters be stolen and shipped and worked to death and lynched and beaten and incarcerated for 400 years, and Wakanda has not lifted one finger. Wakanda has been content to keep its border closed and its trees pretty and its vibranium hidden and its science to itself, while every black person outside its border has died for the lack of that science. You understand what that is, Kari? Yes, Baba, what is it? That's a betrayal. That's a betrayal, Erik had said. And the betrayal has a name, and the name is the throne, and the throne wears a face, and the face is my uncle's. And when my uncle dies, the face is going to be my cousin's. And my cousin don't know none of this. My cousin loves the country. My cousin loves the country like a man loves a woman he ain't never met. He don't know her. He don't know what she done. He don't want to know. And if you let a man like that take the throne goes on as it was, only with a kinder smile on it. You understand? Yes, Baba. So when I say I want to be king, I don't want to be king. I want the throne to be different. To be different, the throne needs a man who knows what it's done. I'm the only man alive who has the bloodline and the knowledge. The bloodline because my father was Njabu, son of Azuri, brother of T'Chaka. The knowledge because I grew up here where Wakanda left us to die. You with me? Yes, Baba. What's the part where you come in? I'm the diplomatic emissary. I'm the magical bridge. I'm the inside man at the wizard's school. I'm the proof that Wakanda has reached out into the magical world. I'm the new policy walking around in a small black robe. How do you feel about being a piece on a board? The boy had thought. I'm not a piece on a board, he had said. Why not? Because a piece doesn't choose. I'm choosing. What you choosing? I'm choosing the project. I'm choosing what you said, the throne being different. I think the throne should be different. I think the wizard's world should also be different. I think being a wizard inside the throne is the only place where one person can be useful in both worlds, and I think you've trained me to be exactly that. So I'm choosing it. Erik had been quiet for a long time. You ain't a piece, Kari, he had said. You're the player, you hear me, you're the player. I just been holding the chair for you. You ready to sit down? Yes, Baba. Don't say it 'cause I want you to say it. I'm saying it because I want to say it. Erik had stubbed the cigarette out on the rail of the fire escape. He had put the butt in his shirt pocket. He had not littered ever in 12 years of cigarettes because in Erik's particular ethics littering was a sign that a man did not believe his country was his. All right, little man, Erik had said. Then we keep moving. There were the visits. Erik had a small network. Erik called it in his head the side door. The side door consisted of 3 men in Oakland who had known Njabu, all of them now in their 60s, all of them respectful and old-fashioned in their courtesy. 2 Wakandan exiles in Toronto who had fled when Njabu had fled and who had been afraid to go home. 1 woman in Lagos who had been Njabu's lover before he had ever met Erik's mother. 1 man in Brixton, London, who had been part of the same secret circle of the diaspora curious. Erik visited the Oakland men in person. The others he wrote to in code on flimsy airmail paper in a substitution cipher his father had taught him. The Brixton man wrote back rarely. The Lagos woman wrote back often. The Toronto exiles wrote back never. He took the boy to meet the Oakland men once a year. The Oakland men met the boy first when the boy was 7, when the boy could already greet them in Kosa and offer them a glass of water and discuss in a small wavering child's voice the conditions of black labor in the California gold rush. The Oakland men had not spoken for some time after that visit. The eldest of them, a man named Brother Daniels who had been a Black Panther in the late 60s, had told Erik in a low voice on the porch as they were leaving, "Njadaka, that boy ain't no boy. He's 6, Erik had said. He's a small old man wearing a 6-year-old, Daniels had said. I seen that one time before, was your father. Erik had looked at Daniels. You doing right by him? Daniels had asked. I mean by him, not by your plan, by him. Erik had not answered for a moment. I'm trying, he had said. Try harder, Daniels had said. Erik had taken the criticism. He had taken it from Daniels because Daniels was older, and because Daniels had loved Njabu, and because Daniels was the only person alive whose criticism Erik would have taken on this subject, and because, also, Daniels was right. The boy needed to be a boy as much as the boy could be a boy. Erik had therefore introduced the following amendments to the curriculum. 1. Saturday mornings starting age 7 were free. The boy could do whatever he wanted. Most weeks he chose to read. Some weeks he chose to draw. Some weeks he chose to climb out the kitchen window onto the fire escape and watch the Panaderia open up and the parade of Oakland walk past underneath. Once at age 8, he chose to ride the BART to San Francisco and back by himself, with $5 Erik had given him for the round trip and a Kimoyo bead that would alert Erik if anything happened. Erik had spent the entire afternoon doing his contract paperwork at the kitchen table and not looking at the Kimoyo dashboard and being, for the first time in his life as a parent, openly afraid. The boy had returned at 5:30 in the afternoon. He had walked in the door. He had told Erik and Kosa that he had stood at the Embarcadero and looked at the bay and decided that the sea did not actually look like the book said it should look, that the sea looked instead like a thing that was trying to remember being something. Then he had asked what was for dinner. 2. Erik had bought a chess set. Erik played chess with the boy at night sometimes and only sometimes won. The boy was, Erik discovered, a vicious chess player, the kind of player who would sacrifice a queen in the 4th move if it positioned him correctly for the 12th. Erik thought of this as a positive sign. 3. Erik had taken the boy at age 8 to a Warriors game at the Oakland Coliseum because Erik liked basketball and felt that the boy should know the experience of yelling in a crowd. The boy had not yelled. The boy had watched the game with the quiet analytical interest of a man watching a kind of warfare he was not personally engaged in. He had said afterwards, "The fastest player is not the most important player. The most important player is the one who passes." Erik had grunted. He had not known whether to be proud or worried. He had decided to be proud. 4. Erik had let the boy keep a stray cat. The cat had appeared in the alley behind the Panaderia when the boy was 9. The boy had named it Nkosa Nkanyezi, which meant star, because the cat had a small white patch on its chest in the shape of a 5-pointed star. The cat lived in the apartment and sat on the boy's books while the boy was reading and made the boy laugh, which was a thing the boy did, Erik noted, rarely but with a real and surprising voice that did not sound like the voice he used otherwise. The cat slept on the boy's pillow. The cat was, Erik decided, worth its keep. There were also the unscheduled lessons. These were the lessons Erik had not planned and which life delivered. When the boy was 8, a man in a cheap suit came to the door asking to see Erik Stevens about a debt. The man was a small-time loansharks collector who had Erik confused with another Stevens on Telegraph. Erik had answered the door. Erik had explained the misunderstanding. The man had refused to leave. Erik had broken the man's wrist in the hallway calmly with one hand while the boy watched from the kitchen door holding a textbook. The man had left, white-faced. The boy had said, "Was that necessary?" "Yes." "Why?" "He came to my door. He didn't leave when I asked." The next time a man comes to a man's door for the wrong reason and the man at the door don't make a price, the man at the door becomes a man with a habit of being mistaken for somebody else and the world treats him accordingly. The lesson here is that you set the price of the misunderstanding. You with me? Yes, Baba, but you could have told him you'd call the police. Police don't come up here, Kari. Police don't come up here for me. Police come up here for me. I become a different problem. I'd rather be the kind of man who breaks one wrist than the kind of man who has police in his apartment. You understand the difference? Yes, Baba. Get me the iodine. He cut his hand on my door frame and I don't want it on the floor. The boy got the iodine. When the boy was 9, a magical letter arrived. It arrived by ordinary U.S. mail in an ordinary white envelope with an ordinary postage stamp showing the American flag. The envelope was addressed in green ink, in a handwriting that Erik recognized from a sample he had purchased 2 years before from a man in Manchester who collected such things, Albus Dumbledore's hand. The letter inside was an unsigned invitation to an unspecified address in London, with the suggestion that the guardian of the young man known to us would be most welcome to make contact. Erik had read the letter. He had read it again. He had not burned it. "What is it, Baba? The headmaster of the school you'll be going to has figured out you're alive." "How?" "Some kind of instrument. Wizards make instruments to track people. Don't ask me how. I'll know more when I figure it out." The point is, he knows you're alive and he knows you're with someone, but he doesn't know who, and he wants to know. What do? We answer. The boy had blinked. Not yet, not directly. We answer in the way that gives us power, not the way he wants. We send a letter back. We send it in the wizard way. We engage a wizard lawyer. Are there wizard lawyers? There are now. There were now. Erik had hired one by means of the smuggler in Casablanca, and through the smuggler had engaged a wizard solicitor in Brussels named Mater Aurelius Devereux, who handled the affairs of magical persons resident in non-magical countries, and who, for a substantial fee paid in vibranium fragments smuggled from the Yokohama black market, agreed to act on behalf of one Erik Stevens, guardian of Mr. Harry James Potter, with absolute discretion. The reply Devereux sent on Erik's behalf was a single sheet of parchment, signed by Erik, sealed with the panther seal of Njadaka, which Erik had carved himself out of a piece of black hardwood, and written in the firm, dense English of a man who has decided how a negotiation will go. The letter said, "To the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the young man is well. He has been raised these past 3 years in a manner befitting a person of his standing, with attention to his health, his education, his languages, his political instruction, and the magical heritage of both his maternal and paternal lines. He is not in danger. He is not in deprivation. He is, in fact, growing into the kind of person his parents would have been proud of, which is a thing I take very seriously, and a thing the Mrs. Petunia and Mr. Vernon Dursley, in whose unsuitable household you saw fit to deposit him, did not. The young man will attend Hogwarts at the age of 11 in accordance with the customs of his maternal line. He will arrive on time. He will be prepared. He will require no remedial work. He will not, however, be available to you or your school for any purpose other than education during that time, and he will not be subject to any guardian's authority that is not mine, until he is of legal age in both the magical and ordinary worlds. Any attempt to circumvent these terms by petition to ministry, by surveillance of his residence, by interference with his guardian, or by what is laughably called among your people the greater good, will be met with consequences whose nature I will leave to your imagination, but which include, at the low end, full public disclosure of the magical world to several non-magical security agencies of my acquaintance. The young man's mother died for him. I have made the same kind of promise to him myself. Do not test it. Sincerely, E.N. Stevens, Esquire, Guardian." The letter had been sent. The headmaster had not replied. The instrument in the headmaster's tower had, however, though Erik would not know this for years, begun to tick at a different rate. There was also the magic. The boy had begun, around the age of 8, to show small, uncontrolled magic in a way that interested Erik intensely. The boy had healed a cat's broken paw at age 8, simply by holding it and intending the bone to fuse, and the cat, not incaniously, an earlier alley cat the boy had befriended and that had been hit by a delivery truck on University Avenue, had walked the next day. The boy had also accidentally turned the ceiling of his bedroom into a star map of the sky over Wakanda at the age of 9. The map had stayed on the ceiling for 6 weeks, and Erik had not had it painted over until the boy was satisfied that he had memorized the constellations. The boy had set a small fire with his palm at the age of 9, in defense of Incanesi the cat, who had been cornered by a Doberman in the alley. The fire had been just enough to make the Doberman think better. The boy had then put the fire out by closing his hand. He had explained to Erik later, with the careful precision he gave to magical observations, that the fire had not felt like a thing he had made. It had felt like a thing that had been inside him, waiting to be invited, and that he had simply opened the door for. Erik had nodded and made notes in a small black book. By age 10, the boy could light a candle by looking at it. He could move small objects across a table without touching them. He could warm a cup of water by holding it. He could, when very angry, push hard at the air around himself in a way that knocked back anyone who tried to crowd him. He had done this once in the panaderia to a man who had reached for the boy's wrist for reasons that had remained unclear, and the man had been knocked back 6 feet against the cooler, and the man had not returned to the panaderia. Erik had bought the boy for his 10th birthday a copy of Magical Drafts and Potions and a small portable cauldron and a beginner's set of ingredients smuggled from Diagon Alley. The boy had read the textbook in 3 days and had attempted on the 4th the basic bull cure potion. He had succeeded. He had successfully brewed 8 of the first-year potions before the kitchen began to smell, as Erik put it, like a different kind of pharmacy than the one I was raised in. At which point Erik had ordered the cauldron moved to a corner of the roof, under a small tarp Erik had purchased at Home Depot for $9.99. The boy stood on the roof at sunset on his 10th birthday in the spring of 1990. The boy was holding the small portable cauldron. The boy was wearing a gi Erik had bought him in San Francisco. The boy's hair was still a mess. The half-moon scar was still on his forehead. The kimoyo beads were on his left wrist. The wooden assegai was in his right hand. The uncanny cat was sitting at his feet. Erik was watching him from the roof door. Erik had brought up a small cake from the panaderia. The cake had 10 candles. The candles were unlit. "Kari," Erik said, "light them with your hand." The boy looked at the candles. He extended his hand. The candles, all 10 of them, took at once. "Make a wish." The boy looked at Erik. The boy was 10 years old. The boy had black hair and green eyes, the eyes that Erik had only known to be Lily Evans's eyes from a wedding photograph Devereaux had located for him through a contact at the Daily Prophet, and a half-moon scar and a small careful mouth. "I don't need a wish," the boy said. "I have the plan." Erik laughed. Erik did not often laugh. He laughed now on the roof in the spring of 1990 against the orange sky over the bay, and he set the cake down on the upturned crate that served as their rooftop table, and he said, "That's right, little king. We got the plan." There was the night Erik first heard the boy speak in his sleep. The night was in the second year. The boy was 7.5. Erik had been awake at 3 in the morning, as he was on certain Tuesdays when he was preparing the books for the apartment's Shell Corporation taxes, and he had heard, through the open door of the boy's bedroom across the hall, the boy speaking. The boy was speaking in Xhosa. The boy was speaking in a tone Erik had not heard from him in waking life. The tone was the tone of a child who was negotiating with someone the child did not entirely trust. The boy was saying in Xhosa, "I do not have to listen to you. I do not have to be afraid. My father is in the next room. My father is in the next room. My father is in the next room." Erik had gotten out of his chair. He had walked to the boy's door. He had stood in the doorway. The boy had been asleep. The boy had been speaking in his sleep. The repetition had been the repetition of a small mantra the boy had constructed for himself in Xhosa for the use of the parts of his mind that the day language could not reach. Erik had stood in the doorway for 1 full minute. He had not entered. He had not woken the boys. He had said in Xhosa, very quietly, to no one in particular, and to the doorframe, and to the sleeping boy, and to the dead father on the other side of the city's long memory, and to the listening night, "I am in the next room. I am in the next room. I am in the next room. He is right." Then he had gone back to his desk and finished the books. There was the night Erik told the boy about the body on the floor. The night was in the 3rd year. The boy was 8. The boy had asked about Erik's father. Erik had answered over the course of perhaps an hour, with the directness he had decided years before would be the only currency in this household. Erik had told the boy how Njabu had brought his American-born son into the apartment one evening in the spring of 1979 and shown him a panther statue and a ring and a stack of books in a language the boy had not yet been taught. Erik had told the boy how his father had explained that night that there was a country across the water, that the country was the home of every black person who had ever been stolen out of Africa, that the country had not yet remembered this, that one day, when the country remembered, every chain in every American prison would melt, and every white man who had built his house on the back of a black man would have to answer for himself, and that Erik would be one of the people who made the country remember. Erik had told the boy that he had been 7 years old at the time, that he had not entirely understood, that he had nonetheless agreed to keep the secret, that he had kept it for 6 months until one night when he had gotten home from school late and the apartment had been quiet. Erik had told the boy that the apartment had been quiet because his father was lying on the floor next to the panther statue with a wound in his side, and the ring had been on the floor next to him, and the killer had gone, and the killer was his father's brother, and his father had said with his last breath, "Erik, my son, the ring, take the ring. Promise me you will go home one day. Promise me you will free them, all of them." Erik had told the boy that he had taken the ring. He had told the boy that he had hidden the ring in a floorboard for 6 years until he had joined the Marines, where he had hidden it inside a copy of the Iliad in his footlocker, which was the only place in any military base in America where a black soldier's possessions had been reliably safe in 1990. He had told the boy that he had used the ring twice in 15 years before bringing it out for the boy. Once to confirm his lineage in a coded handshake with a Wakandan exile in Toronto. Once to scan a forged passport at a Wakandan-built checkpoint at the Mozambique border in 1985. In the brief minute before the checkpoint operator had realized he should have raised an alarm, he had told the boy that the ring was now on his finger. He had held the finger up to the kitchen light. The boy had looked at the ring. The boy had said, "You wear it now. I wear it now, because the work has begun. I do not have to hide it anymore." The hiding was the long preparation. The preparation has ended. The wearing is the doing. What's the doing? The doing is what we've been doing, reading the books, learning the language, doing the forms, eating the food, talking the truth. The doing is each day. The doing don't have a moment where it begins. The doing is the moment between every moment. The doing is what your dad and mom died doing in their own way. The doing is what my dad died doing. The doing is what I've been doing since I was your age, and what you've been doing since you were 6, and what we will be doing all our lives, and what your children, when you have them, will be doing, and theirs." The boy had looked at his hands. The boy had said, "Will I have children?" Erik had paused. "That's up to you," Erik had said. "I hope you do. I think you'd be a good father. You've been raised by one mostly. You know how. You don't got if you don't want to. There's no obligation in the doing on the question of children. Many fine men have not had them. The doing don't require it. What about you? I have you, little man. You don't want one of your own." Erik had considered the question. Erik had considered it for a long while. "You are one of my own," Erik had said. "There is no ranking. I do not need another. I do not in particular want one who comes from a body and who I have to teach things to from before he speaks. The teaching is harder. The man I am, the man I've been built into by the country we live in, was not built for that kind of teaching. I am built for your kind of teaching. You came able to listen. You came able to ask. I do not for the kind of son I would like to be a father of, want to wait for a baby to grow into him. You were already him when I met you. I did not adopt you. I recognized you." The boy had looked at him. The boy had said, "Did you love me when you first met me? Or just feel the recognition?" Erik had paused. "The feeling was a feeling I did not have a word for that first night," he had said. "It might have been love. It was love-shaped. It became love. The becoming was instantaneous by the second day. The recognition was a different thing. The recognition was older. The recognition was something my dad must have felt for me before he had any chance to love me when I was small. The recognition is the bone of love. The love is the meat on it. We had the bone in the cupboard house. We grew the meat on telegraph. You hear me? Yes, Baba, eat your eggs." The boy had eaten his eggs. There was the moment in the 4th year when Erik had first allowed the boy to be present at a contract meeting. The contract had been a small one. The contract had been a security consultancy for a man in Berkeley who owned 3 properties and feared a tenant. The contract had not required violence. The contract had required only a conversation in a coffee shop. Erik had taken the boy with him. The boy had sat at the next table over with a book on the principles of vibranium induction and a glass of orange juice. The boy had not looked up during the meeting. The man in Berkeley had not noticed the boy. The man had been distracted by Erik, who had a way of being distracting when he chose. The man had signed the consultancy contract for $2,000. The boy had finished the glass of orange juice. They had walked home together. On the walk home, Erik had asked the boy what the boy had observed. The boy had said, "The man was lying about which tenant he was worried about. He was worried about a different tenant. The tenant he named is not the danger. The tenant he didn't name is. I would suggest you investigate the second tenant before you do any work for the man." Erik had stopped on the sidewalk. "How?" he had said. "He looked at the door every time you mentioned the first tenant's name. He did not look at the door when you mentioned other tenants. The door faces north. The first tenant lives on the south side of the building by the records you put in front of him. The tenant who lives on the north side of the building is the one whose name he did not give you. Whoever lives in that apartment is the one he is afraid of, but he could not tell you, because he has done something to that tenant he does not want you to investigate. He hired you for the first tenant because he wants you to scare the wrong person." Erik had been quiet for the rest of the walk home. That night Erik had made one phone call. The next morning Erik had returned the man's $2,000 in person and resigned the consultancy. 2 months later, the man in Berkeley had been arrested by the Berkeley police for the assault of a Latina woman who lived on the north side of the building. That night at dinner, Erik had said to the boy, "You ever want to do my line of work, little man, you say the word." The boy had said, "I want to do my own line of work, Baba, but the skills travel, I can use them." "You will," Erik had said. In the boy's 10th year, in the late summer, 2 months before his 11th birthday, Erik took the boy on a journey. The journey was not a contract. The journey did not have a stated purpose. The journey took 11 days and traversed 3 states by Greyhound bus and 1 by rented Buick and 1 by a long sequence of walks. Erik had not told the boy where they were going. Erik had simply on a Monday morning told the boy to pack a small bag and to bring his kimono beads. They went first to Memphis. Erik took the boy to the Lorraine Motel and they stood in silence on the 2nd floor balcony where a bullet had ended a man's life in 1968. The boy did not need the date explained. The boy had read the book. The boy stood there for a long time. Then the boy said, "He was a fool." Erik looked at the boy. "How so?" "Not a fool in his life, a fool in his last day. He was warned. He went out on the balcony anyway. He should not have. You think a man is responsible for his own death because he was killed? No, Baba. I think a man is responsible for his own protection if he knows there are people who want him dead. I think a man who is the leader of a movement has a duty to the movement to not be photographed on a balcony unprotected in a city that has been threatening to kill him. I do not say this to disrespect him. I say it because when I am that man, I will not be on the balcony. When you are that man." "Yes, Baba." Erik looked at him. "You are 10 years old, Kari." "Yes, Baba." and you are planning. You taught me to plan. I did. I taught you to plan. Erik did not say anything for several minutes. Then Erik said, I'm going to tell you something now, and I want you to hear me. You ain't him. He was a different man. He had his way. You have your own way. The way is not better or worse. It is the right way for the man and the time. You don't have to be him to honor him. You have to be you. The honor is in the work, not the imitation. You with me? Yes, Baba. Now read the plaque. The boy read the plaque. The boy did not cry. The boy was, by 10, mostly past public crying. The boy would, 3 nights later in a motel room in Birmingham, cry briefly in his sleep, and Erik would not wake him. They went to Birmingham. They went to the 16th Street Baptist Church. They stood in front of the stained glass window that had been replaced after the bombing, and Erik told the boy the names of the 4 girls, Addie Mee Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Carol Denise McNair, and the boy repeated the names slowly in the warm September Alabama air, and Erik watched the boy say each name as if the boy were placing a stone on a pile. You hear me? Yes, Baba. You are 11. They were 11 and 14. You go to a school in Scotland next year. You will be in a school that has not been bombed since 1605. You will be in a school where the worst injury a child has suffered in 3 centuries was a fall down a flight of stairs and a botched levitation. You with me? Yes, Baba. You do not get to forget these names. The names are why we work. The work is for them. The work is not for the dead because the dead don't need anything from us. The work is for the dead's children who would have been alive and the dead's grandchildren who would have been being born now and the dead's great-grandchildren who would have been our nieces and nephews. The work is for the family tree that didn't happen. You with me? Yes, Baba. They went to Selma. They walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They went to Tuskegee. They went to a small farm in central Alabama that Erik did not explain, where they stayed 2 nights with a very old woman named Mrs. Beulah Carter, who was 93 years old, who had known Erik's father in the late 50s when Njabu had been traveling the South as a young man, and who served them collard and fried chicken and a peach pie, and on the second evening told the boy a long story about a riot in 1919 in which her own father had been killed. The boy listened. The boy asked her questions. The boy asked her with the small, careful precision he asked questions of elders whether she had ever met a Wakandan before Njabu. Mrs. Carter laughed briefly with a sound like a hinge. She said, Child, I met 3. Your grandfather was the first, your grandfather who came through here in 52, and then your father in 58, and then a woman from your father's circle in 69 who passed through with a baby. The baby was your father's. The baby was your father's first. The boy looked at Erik. Baba. Erik was looking at Mrs. Carter. You ain't ever told me that, Mrs. Beulah, Erik said. You ain't ever asked Erik his name, her name. She was a girl. The mother named her Njoya after your father. She died in 71 in Oakland in the same flu that took half the babies in the hospital that year. The mother, Eugenie Williams, went back to her people in Tampa after. I have not heard from her since 73. I do not know if she is alive. The story is the story I have. I am sorry, Erik. The girl was your half-sister. Erik was silent. The boy reached slowly across the table and put his hand on Erik's wrist. Baba. Erik did not look at the boy for a long moment. Then Erik looked at the boy. Then Erik turned his wrist under the boy's hand and gripped the boy's fingers gently like a drowning man taking the smallest hand he could find. Mrs. Beulah, Erik said. Thank you. You are welcome, Erik. You will write down what you remember of her. I will pay you for the writing. I will use the writing to find Eugenie Williams. If she is alive, I will see that she is provided for. If she is dead, I will find her family. The Njadaka line will not lose another. You with me? I am with you, Erik. Kari. Yes, Baba. You had an aunt. I had an aunt, Baba. You will not forget her either. No, Baba, I will not. They left Mrs. Carter's farm the next morning. They drove northwest. They eventually arrived back in Oakland on a Sunday evening, and the panaderia was open. And Brother Daniels was waiting on the front step of the building above the Chinese laundry with a paper bag of conchas in his hand. And the boy ate 2 of them on the stairs up to the apartment. And Erik went into the bedroom and shut the door and sat on the bed and did not come out for 2 hours, and the boy did not enter. And the boy did the dishes from the breakfast they had not had time to do before they had left 11 days earlier, and the boy fed Nkaniezi the cat, and the boy waited. Erik came out at 9:30. The boy had been waiting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of mate. Erik sat down. Erik drank the mate. Erik looked at the boy. You knew to wait, Erik said. Yes, Baba. Who taught you that? You did. You taught me that when a man goes into his room and shuts the door, the man is doing work. The man does not need help with the work. The man needs the man's family to be there when the work is done. The man needs the mate to be hot. The man needs the kitchen to be quiet. That's right. Are you all right, Baba? Number, but I will be. All right, Baba. Drink your mate. The boy drank his mate. They sat together in the quiet kitchen. Erik did not speak again until the cups were empty. Then Erik said, We will find her family. We will, not next week. But before we leave for Wakanda, before you go to school, I want her mother, if her mother is alive, to know what happened. I want her to know I was here. I want her to know I knew her. I want the work, Kari. I want the work to start with my own house. The work starts with our own house, Baba. Our own house, you are right, our own house. The boy stood, the boy washed the cups, the boy turned off the light. The work in due course started with their own house. Eugenie Williams was, in fact, alive, living in a small bungalow in Tampa with a second husband and 2 surviving children. And Erik visited her in October of 1990 and stayed 3 days and listened to everything she had to say. And she was in the end more glad than she had thought she would be that the son Njabo had had after his daughter had survived and grown and become what he had become. And she gave Erik a photograph of Njoya, his half-sister, at 18 months. With Njabu's serious dark eyes and a small fist closed around a wooden rattle. Erik framed the photograph and put it on the mantel in the apartment next to the photograph of his mother, and the photograph of Njabu, and the photograph of Lily and James Potter that Devereux had finally been able to procure for the boy's 8th birthday. The mantel had become a small family altar by that autumn. The boy passed it each morning on his way out to the roof. The boy nodded to each of the 4 photographs in turn before he went up to do the forms. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. 2 letters. 1 thrown. 2 letters arrived in the apartment above the Chinese laundry within 7 days of one another in the summer of 1991. Both letters were intended for Kari Njadaka, son of Erik Stevens, also known as Harry James Potter, of Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, United States of America. The first letter came by owl. The second letter came by a small humming silver beetle the size of a thumbnail, fashioned of vibranium, which flew in through the kitchen window at 4:13 in the morning local time, hovered politely above the table, deposited a tiny scroll, and dissolved into pollen which sifted away on the morning breeze through the gap in the screen. Erik woke at the sound of the beetle. The boy was already awake, standing in the kitchen doorway in his pajamas. The boy had heard the small sound that was not a sound. The boy had been trained by years on a roof in pre-dawn light to wake at exactly such things. The boy and Erik walked into the kitchen together. The owl on the windowsill blinked once slowly, as if accustomed to being kept waiting by recipients who had not appreciated the gravity of the occasion. The scroll on the table glittered with a thin layer of pollen. "You take the scroll," Erik said. "I'll get the owl." Erik took the letter from the owl. He handed the owl a piece of dried tilapia from the refrigerator, because Erik had learned over the years that birds appreciated unusual breakfasts and would return more reliably to a household that recognized this. The owl ate the tilapia and departed. The owl's letter said, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sork, CHF, Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Conv. Of Wizards, dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on 1 September. We await your owl by no later than 31 July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. There was attached a list of books and equipment and a note in green ink at the bottom of the page in a different hand that said only, "We look forward at last to your arrival." AD. The boy unrolled the vibranium beetle's scroll. The scroll was the length of his palm. It was written in the Wakandan script of the Golden Tribe. The boy read it. The boy read it twice. The boy handed it to Erik. Erik read it. Erik did not show surprise. Erik had been expecting it for 11 months. The form of the message, however, was sharper than Erik had expected. The scroll said, "To the one called Njadaka, son of Njabu of the Golden Tribe abroad, the King T'Chaka is dead, killed by foreign agents in Vienna at a gathering of the United Nations. His son, the Prince T'Challa, will be crowned upon the next full moon at Warrior Falls. The right of challenge will be open by ancient custom to any of royal blood who can present themselves before the moon rises. You are known to us. The ring of Njadaka has been seen. Decide, Zuri, the High Priest of Bast." Erik set the scroll down on the kitchen table. He stood for a moment with both hands flat on the wood. He breathed in and out twice. He picked up the kettle from the stove. He filled it. He set it back on the burner. He turned the burner on. "Baba, yes, it's both. Yes, at the same time. Yes, Hogwarts says term starts September 1. The full moon is August 23rd this year, 3 days before we'd have to be in London, 8 days from today. You knew? I knew about T'Chaka. I didn't know the timing. I had a contact in Vienna. The contact got a cable to me yesterday. I was going to tell you today. The scroll just came in faster than I planned. We move." The boy nodded. The boy went to the kitchen sink. The boy filled a glass of water. The boy drank it. The boy set the glass down. The boy spoke. "I have questions. Ask. 1. How do we get in? Wakanda's borders are sealed. We'd be the first outsiders ever. Outsiders meaning we as in neither of us has been there. You haven't been since you were a baby. I have never been. The ring opens a door. The ring is registered to Njadaka's line. Border Patrol scans for it. We declare ourselves at the river. They will challenge. They will then by law escort. The law has not been used in 80 years, but the law has not been removed. 2. The challenge ritual. The rules. You and me have gone over the rules 3 times. Heart-shaped herb is consumed by the challenger. Strength of the panther is removed from the king during the ceremony. He goes inhuman. We go inhuman. Whoever wins is king. Ritual is at warrior falls. Combat is to yield or death. We will not kill T'Challa. T'Challa is family. T'Challa is also useful alive. We yield him, we exile him, we let him keep his life as a man. That's the move. 3. You said showing mercy was political. Walk it again. Mercy is power. Killing the cousin makes a martyr. Killing the cousin makes the queen mother and the princess Shuri and the dowager class enemies for life. Sparing the cousin makes the queen mother a hostage to my generosity. Sparing the cousin makes Shuri. Shuri is 12 years old. Shuri is reportedly already a better engineer than her father's research minister. Sparing the cousin keeps Shuri close enough to study under me eventually as Wakanda's next director of research. Sparing the cousin shows the council I am not the brute they expect me to be. Sparing the cousin secures the next 10 years. The challenge can be won twice, once on the rock, once after. The second one matters more. 4. How do I help in the challenge? You help 2 ways. Way 1, you're with me on the rock, you're a child. The council sees a child and freezes. The child means continuity. The child means the line will go on. The child means even if I die, there is a successor of the line. Way 2, in this we work out tonight, your magic's going to be in my pocket. Literally, we're going to put a small piece of vibranium fragmented charm in my belt. You charm it. T'Challa is going to be physically stronger than I am by 20 pounds. He is also going to be a better trained warrior. His mother had him train under Wakabai from age 4. I have been a better trained warrior for the kind of fight that happens in alleys with knives, but Warrior Falls is not an alley. I need an edge. The edge is yours, not enough that anyone notices, enough that I survive the first 3 minutes and get him off his feet. From there I can take him on the ground. I take everyone on the ground. What charm, sensory misdirection, subtle. He thinks my left foot is 6 inches further back than it is. You read about it in that Bulgarian dueling manual. We worked it last March. Yes, I can do it. Good. 5. Yes, what happens to me at Hogwarts? Erik exhaled slowly. The kettle began to whistle. He took it off the burner. He poured 2 mugs of mate. What happens at Hogwarts, he said, is you go to Hogwarts as the diplomatic emissary of the new king of Wakanda to the magical world of Britain. You go with full sovereign immunity. You go with a Kimoyo network direct to the throne. You go with, listen, this is important. You go as Kari Njadaka publicly and as Harry Potter where the wizards still need to call you that. The 2 names are not in competition. They are the same person seen from 2 different countries. You will not be a student like the others. You will be a student, you will go to classes, you will sit your exams, you will learn the wand magic, you will make friends. But you will also be the representative of a sovereign power who happens to be 11. The British will not know what to do with you. That is good. We want them not to know what to do with you. What's my mission in their terms? 3 missions. List them. 1. Learn everything they have. Magic is 1 technology. Vibranium is another. The combination has not been seriously studied. You're going to start that work in your textbooks, in your spare hours, in your Kimoyo notes back to the research minister. 2. Find this Voldemort thing. We have been told the man is dead, but the man is also not. There's no version of that story where the wizards have actually handled it. They got somebody nasty out there still. We need to know where, what form, what plan. 3. And this is the long term. You are the proof of concept. You are a Wakandan child, an adopted Wakandan child, a black child, child of the diaspora walking through the most racist magical institution in Europe with full sovereign protection. Every time a child hexes you for your hair and faces a Kimoyo retaliation from the Wakandan embassy in the next 12 hours, the magical world relearns what a country is. You're a walking, breathing 11-year-old foreign policy. You with me? The boy was very still. What if I fail? Erik looked at him. Erik did not look away. Erik allowed the question to sit. You don't fail, he said. You ain't trained to fail. You ain't built to fail. And if you do fail, which you won't, but the body of a king's heir has to be ready for the worst case. If you do fail, you come home. There's exactly 1 rule. The rule is the project does not come before the project's children. The throne does not come before you. If at any point the work asks more of you than the work is worth, you call me on the Kimoyo. You say the word, I am there in 28 hours. I pull you out. We go to Wakanda and we hire someone else to be the emissary. You with me? What's the word? Erik thought. The word is Sawubona, he said. The word from the day you came here, the first word I taught you. You say Sawubona on a private Kimoyo channel and I am on a Wakandan jet inside 10 minutes. Sawubona, that's the word. I will not need to use it. I know you won't, baby, I know, but the word's there. The boy drank the mate. The boy looked out the window. Telegraph was waking up. A delivery truck was unloading flour onto the sidewalk outside the panaderia. A man in a green sanitation uniform was emptying the corner bin. The bus stop had a woman in a yellow coat and a boy of about 13 with a backpack waiting for the BART. The boy looked at all of this. The boy looked at it as if he were trying to remember it exactly. The boy looked at it because the boy understood that he might not see Telegraph Avenue again for 9 months, and after that perhaps less and less. I'm ready, Baba, I know. Let's go. Pack a small bag, 2 outfits, toothbrush, the wooden statue of the panther, the wand we got you in Diagon, the kimono set, in Canny as he stays here. Brother Daniels will feed her. We'll be back in 8 months. Move. They move. 46 hours later, after a private jet from Oakland to Frankfurt, a second private jet from Frankfurt to Mogadishu, a Wakandan-built Dragonfly 2-seater from a contact in Mombasa flown north over Kenya at 500 feet, and rising through the cloud cover at the borders of what the world thought it knew, they descended into the Jabari highlands of Wakanda in the failing light of the second day of their journey, and for the first time in his life Kari Njadaka saw his country. The country he saw was not the country he had imagined. He had imagined it from books. He had imagined it from Njabu's photographs and from the holograms in the Kimoyo training scrolls. The reality of it had a quality that was not in the imagination, which the boy could not at first name, and which he later in the hours that followed identified as a kind of music. Wakanda hummed. The land itself hummed. Vibranium, distributed in the earth, in the river beds, in the deposits beneath the cities, vibrated at a frequency that the boy could feel in his molars. The hum was a chord, not a note. The chord had grief in it and triumph in it and the long, patient pulse of an undefeated country. And the boy understood in the first 3 minutes of his arrival that he had been hearing a thin, distant version of this hum in the kimoyo beads on his wrist for 5 years, and that it had been the home note of his life without his knowing. Tears came to his eyes. He let them. Erik, beside him at the open hatch of the Dragonfly, did not comment. The city of Bernanzana rose out of the savannah like a coral reef the gods had remembered. It was a city of curved towers in glass and bronze and dark blue stone, and over every roofline rose a great vibranium spire shaped like a beaded staff. And on every spire was woven a banner of the tribe whose district it crowned, and the banners moved in a wind that did not quite touch the ground. There were domes of vibranium woven into geometric flowers, 12-petaled and 20-petaled and 50-petaled, like the heads of giant lotuses set into the city's skin. There were transit lines of magnetic rail in the sky between the towers, on which carriages moved without sound, like beads on a wire. There was a great central pyramid, stepped in the way of Yoruba sculpture, which the boy recognized from Njabu's drawings as the Palace of the Golden Tribe. There were markets visible from the air, their canopies in red and yellow and emerald. There were trees, many trees deliberately preserved, with houses built around them rather than over them. There was a river, the river of Wakanda, broad and copper-colored under the falling light, which curled through the city as if it had agreed to do so by treaty. The boy memorized it. The Dragonfly was not allowed to land in the city. The Dragonfly was met by a perimeter patrol of 3 Wakandan fighter craft, sleek black flying lozenges with a pilot each, which formed up around it at the city's edge and escorted it down to a landing platform on the savannah a kilometer outside the walls, where a delegation was already waiting. The delegation was 3 persons. One was an old man in robes of orange and black, with a shaved head and a white beard, leaning lightly on a staff. The second was a tall woman with a shaved head and a polished steel collar, holding a vibranium spear, her face perfectly impassive. Erik identified her at a glance as Akoi, captain of the Dora Milaje. The third was a young man, 25 years old, dressed in plain cot, with eyes that the boy had only ever seen in a single photograph that Devereux had quietly located. The young man was T'Challa. The old man stepped forward. Njadaka, he said in English in a voice that was rough and gentle at once. Son of Njabu, you have brought the ring. Erik held up his hand. The vibranium ring with the panther's head sat on his finger. I have brought the ring, Erik said, and I have brought the heir. Zuri the high priest looked at the boy. Zuri looked for a long time. Zuri then bowed very slightly in a way that was not a bow to king but was also not the absence of a bow, and Zuri said in Kosa, I see you, child of the line. I see you, elder, the boy replied in Kosa in a voice that did not shake. Zuri's face moved. The movement could be called many things. Erik chose to call it surprise. You taught him our tongue in your exile, Zuri said to Erik. I taught him our tongue and our books and our forms and our debts, Erik said. And in 3 days I am going to take our throne. Make your peace with that or get out of my way, old man. I have come a very long way to be home. Zuri's eyes did not leave Erik's. The challenge is yours by right, Zuri said. I do not stand in the way of right, but the challenge is also his. He nodded to T'Challa. And the law gives to the king's son the right to stand on the rock and answer the call. T'Challa stepped forward. T'Challa was not what Erik had expected. Erik had expected, perhaps unfairly, a man like T'Chaka, composed, distant, cold with the formal coldness of an inheritor. T'Challa was instead a younger man who looked at Erik with the directness of someone who had been told there might be a long-lost cousin and was now meeting him, and who appeared to be working out, in real time, whether he wanted to embrace him or fight him or both. Cousin, T'Challa said. Erik did not respond. I did not know you existed, T'Challa said. Until 2 months ago, my father had not told me. My father had told no one. I have read the file. I have read about your father. I have read about. I am sorry for what was done to both of you. Erik considered him. Apology recognized, Erik said. Doesn't change the challenge. I do not expect it to. 3 days then. 3 days. Cousin, T'Challa began. Erik raised one hand. T'Challa stopped. Save it, Erik said. Save it for when one of us is standing and the other ain't. You and me got nothing to say in pleasantries. I am here for politics. I am here for a country. I am here because your father killed mine in this apartment building in Oakland that I am still paying property tax on. I am here because the country your father built was the country my father died trying to fix. You don't gotta be apologetic. You don't gotta be hostile. You gotta be ready. 3 days, T'Challa bowed. 3 days, T'Challa said and turned and walked back to the waiting royal carriage. Okoye remained. Okoye looked at Erik. If you win, Okoye said, you will need the Dora Milaje. I will. The Dora Milaje will not serve a king who shames us. Captain Okoye, Erik said, your reputation precedes you. I have read every report I could get my hands on every operation you've run for 14 years. You are the finest officer in this country and one of the finest in any country I know. The Dora Milaje under your command are not going to be shamed by anything that comes out of my throne. You will be expanded, not diminished. You will be deployed where you have not been allowed to be deployed. The Dora Milaje under your command will go to Haiti and Brazil and Mississippi and Soweto. You will be the Praetorian Guard of the global diaspora. You will not be wasted standing in throne rooms. You with me? Okoye did not respond. Okoye's face did not change. But Okoye looked at him for several long seconds, and then her eyes flicked very briefly to the boy at Erik's side and back, and Okoye said, we will see what the rock decides, cousin. Then she too turned, and the carriage departed across the savannah, and the dragonfly was permitted to lift again, and they were escorted by the fighter craft to a guest residence in the border tribe district, where the boy slept on a bed that hummed softly under him in the same chord as the country. And Erik did not sleep at all, but sat on the porch of the residence and looked at the stars, which were unfamiliar because the southern sky has its own constellations. And Erik knew them all from his father's books, but seeing them in their proper place over their proper country was not the same as knowing them in print. And Erik wept for the second time in 11 years, very quietly, without sound, with both hands on his knees, like a man finally permitted to do so in his own house. 3 days later, at Warrior Falls, with the 5 tribes assembled on the cliffs above, with Zuri the high priest at the brink of the rock in his ceremonial gold, with Ramonda the queen mother on her dais, with Shuri the princess sitting cross-legged beside her with both hands tight in her own lap, and her eyes never leaving her older brother. With the small boy Kari Njadaka standing at the edge of the rock platform in a robe of red and black that was being seen by every elder of every tribe and being remembered, T'Challa son of T'Chaka and Njadaka son of Njabu stripped to their loincloths, accepted the marks of the warrior cast on their cheeks, drank no heart-shaped herb because both had relinquished the right by mutual agreement, Erik because he had not earned the herb's gift, T'Challa because he refused to take what his cousin would not, and met one another on the wet rock above the cataract. The boy stood with his hand in his pocket on a small disc of vibranium. He held in his mind the misdirection charm he had practiced for 6 months. He held it tightly. He held it precisely. He held it for the man on the rock who was his father. The fight began. The fight took 94 seconds. T'Challa was strong. T'Challa was fast. T'Challa hit Erik twice in the first 10 seconds, once across the cheek and once in the ribs, and a single drop of blood appeared at the corner of Erik's mouth, and Erik smiled, because Erik had been waiting for that drop of blood for 14 years, and the smile was something that no one on the cliffs would ever forget seeing. Then Erik began to fight back. The misdirection was working. T'Challa's foot kept landing 6 inches further back than he expected. T'Challa was correcting and overcorrecting. T'Challa was a Black Panther who had not yet been to the throne. He had not consumed the herb. He was a man, only a man, the way Erik was a man, and Erik had been training to kill men like T'Challa for half of T'Challa's lifetime. Erik took T'Challa's hip. Erik went under T'Challa's guard. Erik slammed T'Challa to the rock with the controlled brutality of an officer of the United States Navy SEAL Team 6 who had been trained in a school T'Challa had never heard of by men whose only philosophy of victory was that the fight was over when one of the bodies stopped moving. Erik's knife was at T'Challa's throat. The 5 tribes held their breath. Zuri the high priest stepped forward, his hand raised, his voice ready to declare the king dead, the new king crowned. Hold, Erik said. The cliffs were silent. Erik released the knife from T'Challa's throat. He held it instead loosely in his left hand, point down. He stood up. He gave T'Challa his right hand. T'Challa, slow with the effort of breathing through what felt like a broken rib but was not, took the hand. Erik pulled him up. Erik turned to the 5 tribes. By the law of Wakanda, Erik said in fluent court Kosa that the boy on the platform did not know Erik could speak. He had never heard him use it. He had only ever heard him use the dialect of the Golden Tribe and the languages of the diaspora. I have defeated the heir of T'Chaka in honorable combat above the waters. By the same law I claim the throne. I claim it not as a prize but as a duty I have come to perform. By that same law I am entitled to take this man's life. I refuse. I refuse not from weakness. Every elder here saw the knife at his throat, but from policy. The death of T'Challa, son of T'Chaka, would mean nothing but blood between cousins. The life of T'Challa, son of T'Chaka, means a brother in exile by the custom we have inherited from our ancestors until such time as he and I reconcile. He has not committed the crimes of his father. He has not yet committed the crimes of any king. He may yet have a great deal to contribute to Wakanda from beyond Wakanda. I exile him with the rights of a prince in exile and the resources to make of himself what he can. The throne is mine, the brother is mine, the country is ours. Hear me, my people. The Wakanda you have known is a Wakanda hiding behind a hedgerow while its brothers and sisters bleed beyond it. That Wakanda dies today. The Wakanda that begins today is a Wakanda that reaches its hand out openly to the diaspora, to the magical world, to the oppressed of every continent. We do not stop being secret in our location. We do not stop being mighty in our vibranium. We do not stop being free in our borders, but we stop being absent. We stop being cowards. We become the country we were always meant to be. My son stands on this rock with me. He is the proof. He is Kari Njadaka, my adopted son by Wakandan law, and by the law of his mother's people he is Harry James Potter, a wizard of the British Isles who has been raised in our way and who will be our voice in the magical world. He is what Wakanda looks like when it opens its hand. Erik turned to T'Challa. Cousin, he said in English now low only for him. You and me are not done. You and me are gonna have a conversation. You are gonna travel. You are gonna see what your country did not do. And one day when you understand, you are gonna come back and you and me are gonna build the kind of brotherhood your father could not have imagined. Take the time, use it. T'Challa nodded. T'Challa was crying. T'Challa was not a man who wept often, but T'Challa was weeping now. T'Challa stepped to Erik. T'Challa, with both hands shaking, took Erik's face in his hands, the way a Wakandan brother greets a Wakandan brother, and pressed his forehead briefly to Erik's and said in Kosa, "Brother, brother," Erik said. The 5 tribes erupted. Zuri, the high priest who had served T'Chaka for 40 years, and who had been present in Oakland the day that N'Jabu had been killed by his own brother, and who had not slept well a single night since, walked forward across the wet rock in his ceremonial gold and laid both hands on Erik's shoulders and said in a voice that broke in the middle, "All hail the king." The cliffs answered. The boy stood on the platform with his hand still in his pocket on the small disk of vibranium, and his face was wet, and he did not know whether the wet was from the spray of the falls or from himself, and he did not care, and he was 11 years old, and he was the son of a king. The new king walked off the rock and took him by the shoulders. The new king put his forehead against the boy's. The new king said in English very softly, "Kari, my son, my son." "Baba," the boy said, "you ready for the school?" "I am ready, Baba." "Then let's get you fitted." The boy spent 5 days in Zana before they returned to Oakland. He spent them in audience. He spent them in observation. He spent them in being introduced to every minister of every tribe, to the leadership of the Dora Milaje, to the engineers of the research division, where Shuri, who was 12 and had cried twice at her brother's exile but had also not stopped working in her lab for a single day in the meantime, walked him through her current projects without speaking to him as a child, on the strict instruction of King Njadaka, who had advised her that the boy in question was in technical command of one of her primary R&D languages, easily her equal and possibly her senior on certain matters of magical vibranium integration, and to the Queen Mother Ramonda, who received him on her dais with a face whose composure he had been afraid of on the long walk through the throne room, but which dissolved on his arrival in front of her into a small, unsteady smile. "My son spared yours," Ramonda had said. "My father spared his cousin," the boy had said. "And you, child, do you spare?" The boy had thought about the question carefully. "I think the question is, do I keep my father's promises?" he had said. "I think the answer is yes. I think the broader question of whether sparing is a virtue or a tactic is a question I am still working out, and the working out will take many years, and I am willing to come back here and discuss it with you when I have made progress, if that is acceptable." The Queen Mother had laughed briefly behind her hand. "Sit down, child," she had said. "I will pour you tea. I think we will have many conversations." They had. The conversations had begun. The conversations would continue by Kimoyo channel by occasional visits for the rest of the Queen Mother's life. The Queen Mother became, in a way she had not expected and Erik had not engineered, a counterweight in the boy's political education to Erik himself, older, slower, more inclined to caution, deeper in the tribal lore, and the boy who had been raised on Erik's certainty, came to value the Queen Mother's hedging as the most useful kind of corrective. He would write to her twice a month from Hogwarts. She would write back with paper and ink in long letters that arrived by Wakandan diplomatic packet, and which he would read in the Slytherin dormitory by candlelight, and which would shape, in ways the British wizarding world would never see, his decisions during the school year. There was the conversation with Shuri. The conversation with Shuri took place on the fourth day in her laboratory on the lower levels of the Palace of the Golden Tribe, in a long, high-ceilinged room of bare vibranium walls and glowing Kimoyo workstations, with a single window looking down on the river. Shuri was 12. Shuri was a head taller than the boy. Shuri had her hair in braids that fell to her shoulders. Shuri wore a white lab coat over a Wakandan teenager's high-collared dress. Shuri held in her right hand a small device the size of an apple that pulsed faintly with a green light. "I have been told," Shuri said, "that you are a wizard." "I am, and that you have integrated vibranium into the magical instrument called the wand." Ollivander made the modifications. "I designed the concept." "You are 11. I am 11. "And you understood resonance theory at the age of 9. "At the age of 8, technically, though I did not understand it well until 10. Shuri held up the device in her hand. "This is a piece I have been working on. It is a Kimoyo bead modified that I believe can serve as a magical focus. I cannot test it. I am not a witch. I would like you to test it. Your father has authorized." "What does it do?" "I do not know. That is the point. It is a focus. It does what the user does. The question is whether the magical user can do more through it than through a wand. I believe so. I have not been able to confirm." The boy took the bead. The boy held it in his palm. The bead pulsed against his skin. The boy felt a sensation he had not felt with his wand. The wand was an extension. The bead was a conversation. The bead was offering him things. The bead was offering him many things at once. The bead was, the boy realized, a small library of intentions pre-filtered for amplification. The boy chose as a test a small spell. The spell was Lumo. The boy cast it through the bead. The bead became a small sun in his palm. The sun was bright enough that Shuri, standing 2 feet away, raised her arm to shield her face. The sun was sustainable. The bead did not heat. The boy did not feel any draining of his magical reserve. The boy let the spell go. The sun extinguished. Shuri lowered her arm. "How much did that cost you?" Shuri said. "In magical fatigue." None that I can detect. The bead is amplifying without drawing. "I do not know how. I do not have the theoretical vocabulary for it yet." "Neither do I, but I will write it. We will write it together." "We will." She held out her hand. The boy returned the bead. The bead pulsed once softly. Shuri said, "We are cousins by the law of my mother's adoption of my brother's father's brother's son, which is to say we are kin. The kin work together in this family. I want you to know that I am not opposed to your father. I was for a while. I am not now. I have read what he wrote about my father's policies. I disagree with some of his anger. I do not disagree with the substance. My brother is going to come home eventually with his engineering degree and a chastened understanding of what his throne should have been. Your father is going to hand the throne to him eventually with a country reshaped to do the work properly. I will be Minister of Science across both reigns. You will be a wizard across both reigns. The country will be ours. You understand?" "I understand." "Good, then take this." She handed him a second device the size of a thimble. "This is a Wakandan magical communication bead. I will keep its twin. You and I will work together by direct channel on the integration project while you are at school. You will report observations from your classes. I will design instruments based on them. We will publish together when you are 16. Agreed." "Agreed." They shook hands. The boy left her laboratory. He went up 2 floors to his father's study. He told his father what had happened. Erik nodded. "I figured," Erik said. "Your cousin is the best engineer in this country and she's 12. She and you are gonna be the most important pair of cousins in the magical world's history. You and her and T'Challa eventually. The 3 of you." "Don't waste it." "I won't, Baba. I know." End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The emissary at Hogwarts. The wand the boy carried to Hogwarts was not the wand the wand maker had intended to sell him. Ollivander, working in his shop in Diagon Alley at the end of August, in the small dustlit chamber with the boxes stacked to the ceiling and the silver tape measure floating around the boy's collar, had presented the boy with 24 wands, ranging from a willow with a unicorn hair core to a yew with the tail feather of a phoenix, and none of them had quite worked. The willow had produced a thin, cold draft. The yew had produced a small showering of red sparks that the boy felt did not signify acceptance but mere politeness. The 11th wand had warmed in his hand. The 17th had pulled at him. and he had felt a low, pleasant note from it, and Ollivander had said, "Interesting 11 inches, holly, phoenix feather, interesting indeed, Mr. Potter. The brother of this wand is the wand that gave you that scar." Erik, standing in the doorway with both arms folded and the small bone amulet at his throat catching the lamplight, had said, "We'll take the holly, but we're modifying it." Ollivander had blinked. "Modifying it, Mr. Stevens." "Sleeve of vibranium around the shaft, inlay along the grain. No core change, no length change. The wood does its job. The vibranium does its job. The phoenix is what it is. That has never been done." That's a phrase I've been hearing my whole life. Generally, it means something is about to be done. Modify the wand or I take my boy elsewhere and you lose the sale and you lose the article in the Daily Prophet that I will be paying the Daily Prophet to write about you in October if you cooperate. Your choice. Ollivander had looked at the holly wand. Ollivander had looked at the boy. The boy had said in courteous English, "With respect, sir, I've read your treatise on dual substance integration. You said yourself in 1969 that the future of wandcraft lay in coupling magical cores with non-organic resonant matrices. Vibranium is a resonant matrix. It absorbs energy and re-emits it on a chosen frequency. I think you'll find it pairs unusually well with phoenix feather. The phoenix releases, the vibranium absorbs, they're complementary." Ollivander had stared at the boy. Ollivander had stared at the boy a long time, then Ollivander had said very quietly, "You read my treatise." "I read all of them," the boy had said. "I read all of them in the summer I was 9. Ollivander had taken the wand. The wand the boy carried to Hogwarts was therefore a holly wand, 11 inches with a single phoenix feather core, sheathed for the length of the handle in a sleeve of vibranium engraved in the script of the Golden Tribe with the words "Bast guides my hand," and inlaid along the wood's grain with 3 thread-thin veins of vibranium that ran the wand's length and met at the tip. The wand was heavier than the standard wand. It did not look strange in the hand. It looked, in fact, exactly like a wand a serious person would carry. Ollivander, having watched the boy fire his first spell out of it in the shop, a simple Wingardium Leviosa that lifted, with no apparent effort, all of the loose wand boxes on the shelves at once and set them down again in perfect order, had asked, almost in spite of himself, whether the boy would consent to allow him to write up the modification as a case study in his next monograph, with names withheld. The boy had said, "With names included, sir. We want the wizards to know there's a new wandcraft, and we want them to know it has a country behind it. Wakanda will pay you well for the case study, with pictures." Ollivander had said, "Done." They had paid him in vibranium. Ollivander had said his work had now become important. The boy was sorted on the 1st of September into the house of Salazar Slytherin, after a hat which had sat on his head for 41 seconds, and which had spoken to him at length internally, in a voice that the boy had recognized, with some amusement, as belonging to a piece of charmed leather that had been trained on a curriculum of historical Britons and was therefore both elegant and limited. The hat had said, "Difficult, very difficult. A great deal of strategy in this one, a great deal of resolve, loyalty to a single person mostly, though that may yet expand. A hunger for what is right, which is the Gryffindor mark, but a temperance about how to pursue it, which is not. You could go far in any of them, but the question is where you would go furthest, where you would shape the most. You are foreign policy in a small body, Mr. Potter, that is what you are. The house that has produced more politicians, more diplomats, more changers of things in this country than any other is Slytherin. And the house that has done the most damage from Slytherin is also Slytherin. You would shift its character, you would give it a different ambition. You would, I think, yes, I think, make of it what it was meant to be before the smaller men got hold of it. Slytherin, the great hall had gone very, very quiet. The Slytherin table had not cheered. The Slytherin table for the first 30 seconds did not know what to do. A black boy who was Harry Potter. A black boy who was Harry Potter and had been called for in a strange African manner by a man in a thigh-length tunic who had presented credentials at the ministry as the personal emissary of the King of Wakanda. A black boy who was sitting now at the Slytherin table in the place of Green and Silver. A black boy who was Harry Potter and a Wakandan emissary and a Slytherin. The first 30 seconds the Slytherin table sat with their mouths very slightly open. Then a boy at the table, pale-haired, sharp-faced, 11 years old, Draco Lucius Malfoy, son of Lucius Malfoy, of a family which had been pure-blooded for 19 generations and which had been wrong about a number of things for almost as long, stood up. He stood up because something in him understood that there was a moment here, and the moment had to be greeted with one of two postures, and the wrong one would define the next 7 years of his social standing in his house. Draco Malfoy chose in that moment on the basis of an instinct that had been nurtured by a politically calculating father to extend his hand to the boy who was approaching the table. "Potter," Draco said, formally, very precisely. "Welcome to Slytherin." The boy looked at the hand. The boy looked at Draco. The boy noted the lay of the family Malfoy, what he had read of it in his head. Pure-blood supremacists, Death Eater father publicly acquitted, considerable wealth, considerable influence in the Wisengamot. The boy noted also the particular quality of Draco's offered hand, which was the hand of a child who had been told what to do in a crisis but was not yet perhaps entirely his father's son. The boy took the hand. The boy shook it the Wakandan way, which involved a small grip at the wrist, and Draco, who had been about to perform the shake of his father's instruction, found himself oddly steadied by it. Malfoy, the boy said, Kari Njadaka, or Harry Potter in your house records. We'll work out the names later. For now, sit down. We have things to discuss. I have read your father's editorials. Some I disagree with, some I would like to ask you about. Several of them would not survive an argument with my own father, and I will give you the chance to make those arguments to me in your own words in the common room tonight. I think we can have an interesting year. You and I. Draco Malfoy sat down. Draco Malfoy for the rest of his life would tell this story in private to his friends with a small dark laugh in the phrase, and that was when I knew I'd be following him for 7 years. It was already, in that first half-minute, half-true. Severus Snape, watching from the high table, dropped his fork. He picked the fork up. He set it down again. He did not pick it up the rest of the meal. He was perhaps the only adult in the room who had not yet decided what to do with what he was seeing. Albus Dumbledore, beside him, did not eat at all. By the second week of term, the boy had established a private correspondence channel to Erik through a Wakandan diplomatic owl with vibranium feathers, which could not be intercepted by Hogwarts wards, made formal acquaintance with the head of Slytherin House, the head of Gryffindor House, the head of Ravenclaw House, and the head of Hufflepuff House by separate tea times, formally requested and received a private audience with the headmaster, in which he had presented his credentials as Wakandan emissary, declined a sherbet lemon, and asked Albus Dumbledore the following question. Headmaster, when you left me on the doorstep of the Dursleys in November of 1981, did you know what kind of household it was? Received from the headmaster a long answer that was not quite an answer, and noted it identified quarrel with Voldemort on the back of his head within 3 days of meeting him in the corridor outside the defense classroom, because the Kimoyo beads on the boy's wrist had registered a low resonance of necromantic instability in Quirrell's vicinity that the boy had been trained to recognize from a paper in the Wakandan Thaumaturgical Journal he had read at age 10, sent the relevant Kimoyo reading to Erik. Received from Erik by return owl a single sentence, take the body when you can. I authorized the kill. The taking of the body required preparation. The boy was patient. The boy had been trained to be patient. The boy attended his classes. He sat in the front row in potions and corrected Snape's pronunciation of an Igbo herbal name on the third day with the brief courtesy of one professional addressing another. And Snape, after the briefest of pauses, had thanked him, had repeated the correction, and had moved on. The boy answered correctly in Transfiguration. The boy demonstrated wandless cantrips and charms that made Phileas Flitwick clap his small hands together with delight. The boy excelled beyond anyone's expectation in defense against the dark arts despite the marked nervousness of the professor in his presence. The boy did not excel in history of magic, deliberately, because the boy had decided that being too good at history would invite the wrong kind of attention from the wrong kind of teacher, and the boy needed at least one B in his transcripts to look like a real child. He made allies. Hermione Granger, who in another life would have been Harry Potter's best friend after the rocky start of a troll in a bathroom, met Kari Njadaka in the library on the 7th of September while looking for a book on goblin rebellions of the 16th century. He recommended a better one. He had it on the shelf in Slytherin. He brought it to her at her common room door himself with a small bow, and she had stared at him with the wide eyes of a child who had thought she was going to dislike him on principle, and discovered instead that she had been waiting all her life for someone to bring her a better book on goblin rebellions. Hermione Granger by October was reading, at the boy's recommendation, Walter Rodney. Ron Weasley, who in another life would have been the boy's first friend, made the mistake on the train of saying, in front of his older brothers, that all the dark wizards came out of Slytherin. And the boy, 3 compartments down with Draco and Pansy Parkinson and Theo Knott, did not hear it, but Fred and George Weasley heard it, and George Weasley said mildly that there had been a man named John Brown in America who had not come out of any Slytherin. And that perhaps Ron should consider whether the houses were the point or whether the world was the point. Ron Weasley, age 11, did not yet have the frame of reference for that thought. He would come to it slowly, over years. The boy did not befriend Ron Weasley in the first year. The boy nodded to Ron Weasley in corridors. The boy left the door open. The door would, by the 3rd year, be walked through. Different timeline, same friendship eventually, but built on more equal terms. He befriended Neville Longbottom on the 2nd night. Neville had been crying in the common no, Neville had been crying in a corridor outside the Hufflepuff common room because someone had stinging hexed his toad. The boy had come past. The boy had healed the toad. The boy had said, "Hold this, walk with me, I will show you a Wakandan calming exercise. By the time we get to your common room, you will be sufficiently steady to do whatever you would like to do to whoever did the hex. You can choose forgiveness or you can choose response. Both are honorable. Pick what is right for you." Neville had stopped crying within a minute. Neville had decided after consideration on response. The boy had taught him a non-lethal jinx that Neville could plausibly have learned out of his own library. Neville had used the jinx with marked precision on a Slytherin third-year boy named Marcus Flint, 2 days later in front of witnesses, and Neville Longbottom had walked away from that corridor with a posture that, his grandmother would later note with mute and tearful astonishment, had not been seen on a Longbottom since his father. He befriended Luna Lovegood when she arrived 2 years later, as a matter of inevitability. He befriended Cedric Diggory in the second year by playing him at chess. He befriended Susan Bones at the Halloween feast of his first year by sliding her, across the table, a Wakandan tea cake from his pocket and saying, "Your aunt has, in my opinion, made the right call on the Dementor question, and I would like to write her a letter saying so. Will you carry it for me?" Susan Bones, age 11, niece of the director of magical law enforcement, had taken the tea cake, eaten it, and said yes. He took the kill on the night of Halloween. Quirrell, on Halloween in the unaltered timeline, had led a troll into the dungeons as cover for an attempt at the Philosopher's Stone. The Kimoyo beads warned the boy 6 hours before. The boy did not go after the troll, which was Hermione's problem in another timeline and was no longer her problem in this one because the boy had instructed her to spend Halloween at his elbow in the library. The boy went after Quirrell. He took 2 precautions. He sent a Kimoyo signal to Erik on a coded channel that simply said, "Action 2300 GMT." He requested from Wakanda a single piece of vibranium backup to be delivered overnight by Panthercraft to the Forbidden Forest perimeter. The piece of vibranium backup came in the form of a small disc the size of a coin, which the boy received from a Dora Milaje courier on the edge of the forest at 5 in the afternoon, with a quick nod, and which he slipped into the pocket of his robe on the left side against the hip. The disc was a Kimoyo trace beacon. It would, when activated, summon a particular piece of Wakandan ordnance into the immediate vicinity. The ordnance was a vibranium ring blade, twin to the one Erik had used in Privet Drive 5 years before. It would arrive in the boy's right hand within 110 seconds of activation. He did not need to activate it. He used the Holly wand instead. Quirrell was at 11 on the night of Halloween on the 3rd floor corridor, approaching the trapdoor behind the Forbidden Corridor's 3-headed dog, which the Kimoyo network had identified to the boy weeks before as Hagrid's pet Fluffy. The boy stepped out of an alcove behind Quirrell. The boy spoke in a voice that was not raised. "Professor." Quirrell turned. Quirrell's turban was unwound. The back of Quirrell's head, where Lord Voldemort had been parasitically resident for 11 years, was exposed, and the small, terrible face that the boy had been told to expect, and which he had nonetheless not been entirely able to prepare for, snarled at him from above Quirrell's collar. "Potter," Voldemort hissed, "the boy who lived. The boy who is not negotiating," the boy said in Kosa, because some moments deserve a private language. Then in English, "Goodbye, Professor. Goodbye, Lord." The vibranium-sheathed Holly wand came up. The boy's other hand cradled the vibranium disc at his hip, not to summon a blade, but to pull from it a small precise field of nullification, which the wand was built to amplify, and which dampened the curse the parasitic Voldemort tried to throw, Avada Kedavra, the killing curse, so that the green light from Quirrell's wand barely reached the boy's body, and then dissolved against him into a brief, ugly, mottled wash of dirty green steam. The boy's curse went through the next half-second. The boy used a Wakandan offensive incantation that was not in any British curriculum and would not be for 1,000 years. The boy had read it in a Kimoyo-translated paper at age 10, with annotations by Erik in the margins. The incantation was a directed disruption of the bond between flesh and spirit at the level of the body's electrical field. It was not technically and unforgivable. It was something the British did not have a word for. Quirrell's body folded. Voldemort's piece, the fragment of soul nesting on the back of the skull, tore loose. It tried to flee. The boy had been warned about this, too. The boy had a vibranium chain in his pocket, no thicker than thread, 10 inches long, with a small hooked clasp at the end, woven by a priest of Bast at his father's order. The boy threw the chain. The chain wrapped of its own knowing accord around the small parasitic wraith of Voldemort that was trying to streak through the air toward the Forbidden Forest. The wraith screamed. The boy did not. The boy held the chain. The chain held the wraith. A Wakandan dragonfly craft, summoned by the Kimoyo trace, descended through the rotunda of the Forbidden Corridor, gentle, silent, the way snow falls. From its open hatch, the Dora Milaje courier from earlier in the afternoon, whose name was Inka, stepped out with a small vibranium box in her hands. "Kari," Inka said. "Inka," the boy said. He handed her the chain. She lifted the wraith. She placed it, screaming, into the small vibranium box. The lid closed. The screaming stopped because the box was lined with a substance the priests of Bast had developed in 1907 for the imprisonment of malign ancestral fragments, and which Erik had requisitioned for this purpose by direct order from his throne. "One down," Inka said, in Xhosa. "6 to go," the boy said in Xhosa, because the Kimoyo had also told him by way of his father's chief researchers that there were 7 Horcruxes and that the 7th was by complicated argument in his own forehead. Inka regarded the boy for a moment. Inka was a Dora Milaje. Inka was an officer. Inka was 28 years old. Inka had not previously commanded an 11-year-old wizard in a magical school corridor at midnight on Halloween. Inka said, "Are you all right, my lord?" "I am all right, sister. Your father will be relieved to hear it. Tell him for me. Also tell him I will write tonight. Also tell him the 7th fragment situation is manageable. We have plans. I will discuss in the next letter." Inka touched her forehead to his. The dragonfly lifted. Inka and the box and the wraith departed. The boy walked back to the Great Hall. The Great Hall was in the middle of the feast. The troll was still wandering somewhere in the dungeons, where it had been let in by a dying Quirrell whose body the boy had set with a small spell to dissolve into a fine gray dust within 20 minutes, leaving nothing forensically interesting behind. The headmaster, on his way out of the Great Hall to deal with the troll, met the boy in the entrance hall. The headmaster was an old man and a powerful man and a tired man, and the headmaster had felt the wand magic on the 3rd floor at 11, and the headmaster had felt the dragonfly's anti-magic shielding at 5 past, and the headmaster knew, without having seen any of it, that something had happened that had never been allowed to happen in his school in 50 years. And the headmaster, looking at the boy, did not know whether to ask the question, because he understood, looking at the boy, that there were 2 possible answers, and that one of them was the wrong answer, and that asking the question gave permission for the wrong answer. "Headmaster," the boy said, "Mr. Potter, Professor Quirrell will not be returning to the school. He has defected to foreign power, to which power I leave to your investigation, but the Kimoyo trace records that I have provided to my father's office are available to your Auror service through diplomatic channels. The body's disposition is regrettably beyond recovery. He chose suicide rather than capture, in a manner consistent with the kind of magical bond he had entered with his employer. The defense post will need filling. I might suggest in confidence Madame Bones's recommendation as the next candidate. There is an Auror named Tonks who is, I am told, an excellent practical instructor. Good night." The headmaster looked at the boy looked at the headmaster. "Mr. Potter," the headmaster said after a long pause, "you are 11 years old." "Yes, sir." "And you have killed a man tonight." "Yes, sir." "That is, sir, may I respectfully interrupt? Tom Riddle was attempting to murder me as part of a plan to return to bodily existence. I defended myself. I removed his accomplice. I removed his body. I did so with the legal authority of an emissary of a sovereign foreign power acting in self-defense on the soil of a friendly nation, which I will need you to acknowledge in writing within 72 hours via the Wakandan embassy. I am 11. I am also a soldier. I am also a citizen of a country that has not been at peace for any of the last 4,000 years, even when the world thought it was. I do not enjoy what I did tonight. I will not do it gladly, but I did it. And I would like to go to bed, sir, because tomorrow is double potions, and Professor Snape will, with respect, set me a difficult question if I look tired. Dumbledore did not respond for a long time. Then Dumbledore said very softly, "Good night, Mr. Potter." "Good night, headmaster." The boy went to the Slytherin common room. Draco Malfoy was waiting for him on the green leather sofa by the fire, with a chessboard set up between them. "Where were you?" Draco said without looking up. "Removing a problem." "Whose problem?" "Mine, the school's, yours eventually." Draco did not press. Draco had begun in the last 3 weeks to understand that some of the boy's movements would not be explainable to him for years, and that the way to be trusted was to be patient about which movements those were. "Want to play?" Draco said. Yes, they played. The boy lost deliberately in 26 moves, because Draco's confidence needed feeding that night more than the boy's pride needed protecting, and because the boy had been taught by his father on the linoleum of an apartment on Telegraph Avenue that the chess in the room was rarely the chess on the board. That night the boy wrote on a piece of Kimoyo parchment to his father, "Baba, first fragment of 7 secured, Quirrell body dust, headmaster informed, he suspects much, knows nothing. Slytherin going to plan, house politics manageable, Hermione Granger to be approached for Wakandan summer research stipend." Draco to be cultivated, he is reachable, his father is not, but his father's wife may be. Snape is more competent than I expected and may be approachable on the long term, will report weekly. 6 fragments remain. Diary suspected at Malfoy Manor. We will need to be careful with the boy. I am well. I am eating. I am sleeping. Incaniezi is being fed. I see you. Akari Erik in Bernanzana in the king's private study in the high tower of the palace of the Golden Tribe read the message at 3 in the morning local time. He read it twice. He folded the parchment. He poured himself a glass of pomegranate juice, which was the only thing he drank in his study now, because he had decided that the new king of Wakanda would not drink alcohol because his father had not, and there were going to be many ways in which he was unlike his father, but this would not be one of them. He stood at the window. He looked down at the city. The city was lit at night with the soft amber lamps that ran on vibranium induction. The city was beautiful. The city was finally beginning to do its work. Sawubona, my son, Erik said softly to the window. Yibo, Sawubona. The boy's first Christmas at Hogwarts was spent at the school. He had been invited to come home. He had declined with the explanation that he wished to use the holiday for diplomatic observation. He had been issued a temporary writ by his father authorizing him to remain on the school grounds and meet, individually, with as many faculty members as would consent. The headmaster had not opposed it. The headmaster had in fact been pleased. The headmaster had not yet had a private conversation with the boy that had gone the way the headmaster wished it to, and was hoping the Christmas break might provide one. The boy spent Christmas Day with the headmaster in the headmaster's office for 2 hours. The conversation was conducted over tea and a small plate of mince pies the headmaster had been delivered by the kitchens. The headmaster asked the boy a series of questions about Wakanda. The boy answered them. The headmaster asked the boy a series of questions about the boy's intentions for the next 6 years. The boy answered them. The headmaster asked the boy at the end of the second hour what the boy thought of Albus Dumbledore. The boy thought before he answered. I think you are a great man, the boy said. I think you are a tired man. I think you have made a great many decisions in your life that you have justified to yourself with a phrase about the greater good. I think the phrase has done you a disservice. I think you have used it as a way to avoid feeling in advance the costs of the decisions you make. I think you did not, when you left me on the doorstep of the Dursleys, calculate the cost to me, although you calculated other things. I do not hold it against you, because holding it against you would be a waste of the only mind in Britain that is currently equipped to help me with the next thing I need to do. But I would like to ask you, sir, with the deepest respect, would you, in the future, consider the phrase, the greater good, to be a phrase to be retired in your own internal speech? I find it gets in the way of clearer reasoning. The clearer reasoning, for what it is worth, would be, what is the greatest amount of good I can do in this specific situation for the specific named people involved, while also doing no avoidable harm to the same? The greater good has a name. The name should be in the sentence, otherwise the goodness drifts. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Potter, he said, I will consider it. Sincerely, I will. Thank you, sir. May I ask, is that something you and your father have discussed? He gave me the seed of the thought. The flowering is mine. The seed was watered by my reading of your published writings, which I have read in full, sir. I think your essays on transmutation are excellent. I think your political essays in the Daily Prophet between 1953 and 1968 are also excellent and have largely been forgotten. I think you stopped writing political essays at the precise moment in your career when your political essays would have begun to be most useful. I would like to encourage you to start writing them again. There's going to be a war, sir. The war is not just with Voldemort. The war is with the system that produced Voldemort. The system needs to be challenged in print as well as in defense. You have a printing press in your office. You should use it. Dumbledore looked at the wall behind the boy for a long time. I will consider that too, he said. He did. He wrote a column in the Daily Prophet beginning in January of 1992, titled simply Of the Greater Good, in which he wrote in 718 words a public retraction of the phrase as he had used it, and an apology to Gellert Grindelwald, who had been the original recipient of the phrase as far back as 1899. In private correspondence the headmaster had never publicly acknowledged, and to several other persons named by initial only. The column was the most read item in the Daily Prophet that month, and the next month and the third month, and Dumbledore continued writing, until by the end of the boy's 7th year the Daily Prophet was a different newspaper and the Wisengamot was a different body and the country was beginning to be a different country. The boy's first Christmas at Hogwarts also involved a visit to the kitchens. The boy had not yet met the house elves. He had, however, prepared. He had brought in his trunk 25 small kimoyo beads with the diplomatic signature of the office of the King of Wakanda etched into their inner faces, and 25 handwritten letters in the script of the Golden Tribe, translated underneath in English. addressed personally by his father to the house elves of Hogwarts School, in which letters his father formally invited the house elves to consider themselves, by Wakandan law, persons of unimpeachable dignity, with rights to fair labor, fair pay, fair holiday, and the freedom to leave any household they chose, with the kingdom of Wakanda available as a sanctuary on receipt of a single Kimoyo signal. The boy did not, in his first visit, distribute the letters. The boy understood the politics of the kitchen. He understood that a house elf who received a letter freeing him without the consent of his household would suffer. He understood that the path to the house elves' liberation in the magical world of Britain would be a long path. He instead took tea with the elves. He listened to them. He learned their names. He learned which of them had children. He learned which of them had been ill. He sent that very week a small Wakandan tonic by his diplomatic owl to Mippy, who had been struggling with the seasonal lung ailment of the older house elves. Mippy recovered. Then slowly, over the next 4 years, the boy did the diplomatic work. He met Dobby. He arranged for Dobby's freedom. He helped Dobby set up the small Wakandan-funded house elf cooperative in Hogsmeade in his 3rd year. He invited interested elves to visit the cooperative. He let the cooperative grow on its own terms. He did not make it the boys' project. He made it the elves' project. He provided the framework. They built the house. By the end of his 4th year, the cooperative had 11 members. By the end of the war, it had 312, drawn from across Britain. The cooperative would, in due course, draft and pass through the post-war Wisengamot the House Elf Persons Act of 1998, which would be the most significant piece of magical labor legislation in British history. The boy would receive no public credit. He would by then have arranged for none. In the second half of the boy's first year at Hogwarts, after the Halloween action against Quirrell, the school began to change in small ways the staff could not individually account for. The change had no single source. The change was 1,000 small adjustments running through the body of the school, the way blood runs through a body that has just received a transfusion. The boy was the transfusion. The change was the body adapting. Snape, who had begun the term hating the very fact of Harry Potter's existence with the dense compounded hatred of 20 years, did not, by January, hate the boy anymore. He could not. The boy had made the hatred technically impossible. The boy had on 3 separate occasions taken Snape aside in his private office and asked questions about potions theory that Snape had not heard since his own postgraduate research. The boy had quoted from memory a paper Snape had published anonymously in 1981 under a pseudonym, a paper Snape had presumed nobody alive remembered, and the boy had then asked Snape whether the paper's argument concerning the resonance couplings of crushed bezoars could be extended to vibranium dust. Snape, in his office behind his desk, had stared at the boy. Snape had then begun to talk. Snape had talked for 43 minutes. The boy had taken notes. Snape, at the end of the 43 minutes, had said, "Mr. Potter, the pseudonym. I will not repeat it, sir, even in private. I have no interest in your private life. I have an interest in your work. I will be writing your name into my own future publications properly. We will, sir, with respect, be doing some work together." Snape had looked at him. "Some work?" "Yes, sir." "Of what kind?" "Of the kind that requires a man with your knowledge of dark magical residue and a man with my access to Wakandan vibranium resonance theory. I believe, with your help, we can identify the precise magical signature of an object of dark soul binding. I have reason to believe, sir, that this matters. I will tell you the reason when I am certain you wish to know it. Until then, the work itself is sufficient justification, and the work is funded by my father's research office, who will pay you a quarterly retainer of 800 galleons in cash with a complimentary acknowledgement in any joint publications. May I sit down, sir?" Snape had stared at him. "Sit," Snape had said. "Sit, Potter, or whatever you want to be called. Kari, sir, in this office, Potter in the corridors. I have several names, they are all me." The work had begun that January. By April, Snape and the boy had identified the magical signatures of all 4 of the Horcruxes the boy had not yet personally encountered. By June, they had completed a draft of a paper Snape would, with the boy as second author, submit to the International Magical Chemistry Journal in 1993 under his own name for the first time in his career, and which would, over the next decade, become a foundational text in the new subdiscipline of magical vibranium integration. McGonagall did not need to be cultivated. She had decided about the boy in the first week. Sprout fed the boy bread and tea once a fortnight in the greenhouses and discussed agriculture. The boy taught her 3 Wakandan magical botany techniques in exchange for her teaching him the British use of dittany. Flitwick agreed, before the first year was over, to be the boy's private extracurricular charms tutor in exchange for the boy translating a goblin manuscript Flitwick had been struggling with since 1971. Hooch played the boy at chess. The boy taught Hooch a Wakandan flying game involving small disc-shaped tags and a low-flight broom that Hooch tried in March, and was so taken with that she petitioned the headmaster to form a school team. The petition went nowhere, but Hooch played the game with the boy every Sunday for the rest of his time at school, and Hooch would in 1998 found the first British league for the sport and would name the league cup the Kari Njadaka Cup at the boys' blushing private protest because Hooch said it was not the boy's choice whether his name went on the cup. Hagrid liked the boy from the first encounter. Hagrid had not been told what to expect. Hagrid had been told only that a special student was arriving, and that the special student would, in the course of the year, perhaps need a friend who could keep his head about strange goings-on. The boy had visited Hagrid's hut on the second evening of term. The boy had brought, by way of introduction, a small carved wooden panther, a small replica of the one on Njabu's mantle, and a Wakandan herb preparation that Erik had told him to give to Hagrid as a present, which was a brew the priests of Bast used for the calming of difficult magical creatures, and which Hagrid would discover over the next 4 years, made his three-headed dog Fluffy notably more cooperative in the management of the music Hagrid played to put Fluffy to sleep. Hagrid had wept the first time the boy gave him the panther. Hagrid said it was the kindest thing a student had given him since 1953. The boy had not known what to say to that. The boy had said, "Sir, the panther is so you remember that you have a friend in Wakanda. We have heard of you. My father has heard of you. The story of you fighting off the giant boar with your bare hands in 1979 has reached our embassy. We salute you." Hagrid had wept again. There was the matter of the Weasleys. The Weasleys had been in the original timeline of the boy's life his second family. In this timeline they were not. The boy had a first family. The boy did not require a second. The boy was, however, fond of Fred and George Weasley from the very first week of term, because Fred and George Weasley had heard, by some means involving an older brother and a great deal of common room rumor, that the boy was a black diplomat from a country no one had heard of, and Fred and George had decided by sheer twin instinct that this called for the offering of a gift. They had offered on the second morning a wheezing wallop, a small magical sweet of their own invention that produced in the eater a brief uncontrollable two-syllable laughter for 30 seconds, and the boy had accepted, eaten, laughed for 30 seconds, and then without comment handed back to Fred a small Wakandan herbal lozenge that produced in the eater the same effect, only on a chosen consonant cluster picked by the giver. Fred had eaten the lozenge. Fred had spent the next 30 seconds saying GRX, 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 GRX. George had laughed so hard he fell off the bench. Fred had then said in normal English with his ears red, "Potter, we are friends now." "We are friends now," the boy had agreed. They had in due course become Fred and George's silent partners. The boy had introduced them by letter to Wakanda's chief researcher in commercial magical product design, who had been herself a connoisseur of practical joke products since her own time at the Wakandan Institute. The chief researcher and the twins had begun a transatlantic correspondence that resulted, by the autumn of 1994, in a small shipping arrangement that would, over the next decade, make Weasley's Wizard Wheezes the most internationally distributed magical novelty company in the world, and would also, by the way, fund the joke shop's opening on Diagon Alley in 1995, a full year ahead of the timeline where the boy had not been involved. The boy did not formally cultivate Ginny Weasley after the diary incident on the platform. The boy was, by the boy's own preference, not in the business of cultivating 11-year-olds when he himself had only just become 12. The boy did, however, make a point of greeting her in corridors, of giving her on her birthday a small Wakandan-made notebook with a charm on it that meant only she could read its contents, and of in the boy's third year recommending her to the Quidditch coach for the Gryffindor team, on the grounds that the boy had watched her play in the family garden during a half-day visit to the Burrow on his second-year Easter holiday, and had concluded that she had the eyes of a seeker. Ginny made the team in her second year and played for Gryffindor for the rest of her schooling, and the boy attended every Slytherin Gryffindor match in which she played, and cheered openly for her over his own house's seeker. And his own house, after the first such match, had simply rolled its collective eyes and accepted that this was who Kari Njadaka was. By the end of the boy's first year, the boy had been awarded the Defense Against the Dark Arts Annual Prize, despite not formally being a candidate by special staff vote, been quietly placed at the top of his class in 5 subjects out of 7, been informally requested by Madame Pince to assist with the cataloging of the restricted section in his free time, a request the boy declined politely, on the grounds that he did not yet have his father's permission to read the restricted section's contents without a chaperone, sent his father. By diplomatic owl, 412 pages of class notes, observations, and political assessments, of which his father had read every word, and on which his father had returned, by reply, an average of 14 pages of follow-up questions and instructions per packet. He went home for the summer of 1992 to Oakland. He spent the first 3 weeks in the apartment over the laundry, Alone with Erik, Io was not yet in the picture. That summer was the last summer of the original two-person household. Reading, sparring on the roof, drinking mate at the kitchen table, eating Brother Daniel's bread, and being in the boy's quiet internal estimation the most relaxed he had ever been. He spent the next 2 weeks in Wakanda. He spent the last 3 weeks of the summer back in Oakland, sleeping on the fire escape on warm nights with Nkaniezi at his side, and watching the panaderia open at 4 in the morning each day, and listening to the city. Brother Daniels, on the 3rd night of August on the front stoop, said to him, "Kari, boy, how was the school?" "It was useful, Brother Daniels." "Useful," he says, "in England. In England, you make friends there." "Yes, sir. Black children. Some. There are about 60 of us at the school. Most are from London, some from Africa, some from the Caribbean. Most are kind, some are angry, some are afraid. The angry ones are usually right to be angry. The afraid ones I have been working on. There is one named Angelina Johnson in the year above me who plays Quidditch, who has decided I am her younger brother by adoption, who I have not been able to dissuade, and who I have therefore agreed to be the younger brother of. She is 15 and very fierce. She wants to be a healer. I have arranged for her to spend 2 weeks of next summer at the Wakandan Medical Institute. My father has approved." "Your father?" "My father, sir." Brother Daniels nodded slowly in the warm night air. "You doing the work, Kari?" "I am doing the work, sir." "Your father proud?" "He is, sir. He says so. He says so plainly. I have not had to guess. He is a man who says what he means." "Good, good. That is the right kind of father. The other kind, you spend your whole life guessing what they think of you and they die before they tell you, and you spend the next 40 years on the guess. I had the other kind, Kari. I would not wish him on anybody. Your father, the one I knew, was the right kind. Your father, the one you have, is also the right kind. You have been twice lucky." "I have been twice lucky, sir." "Drink your mate." "Yes, sir." End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. The middle years. The second year began with the diary. The Kimoyo network in Wakanda had already, by the time the boy returned to Hogwarts for his second year, identified by a combination of magical signal analysis, intelligence intercepts at the Malfoy Manor perimeter, and a careful interview with a house elf named Dobby who had presented himself at the Wakandan embassy in London in late July, and been received with the courtesy due any refugee from any tyranny. That one Lucius Malfoy had been instructed by his absent master to deposit a particular cursed diary in the school in such a way as to bring its magic into contact with an innocent. Lucius, the Kimoyo signals indicated, intended to plant the diary on Ginny Weasley, a small ginger-haired first year on the platform at King's Cross. The boy went to the platform on the 1st of September with 3 Dora Milaje in plain clothes as his diplomatic escort, with 2 Kimoyo beads on a charm bracelet that the second-year boy now wore in addition to his standard set, and with a particular vibranium ring blade folded into the lining of his school cloak. The ring blade was small, no larger than a paperweight, and could be drawn and deployed in 3/4 of a second. Lucius Malfoy was approached on platform 9 and 3/4 at the moment he reached, with what he believed to be the discretion of a man of his social standing, into a particular battered second-hand cauldron in the Weasley family pile for the purpose of depositing the diary. Lucius reached. The boy reached at the same moment. Their hands met inside the cauldron. The boy's hand closed around Lucius's wrist. The boy did not look up at Lucius. The boy looked instead at Ginny Weasley 2 paces away, and the boy smiled at her, and the boy said, "Ginny, hello. I'm sorry, Mr. Malfoy. Would you let go of my book? I left it in the cauldron yesterday, and I came back for it." Lucius Malfoy, to his eternal credit as a man with a finely honed instinct for which fights he would lose, let go. He withdrew his hand. The diary was no longer in it. The boy's hand, also withdrawing, had the diary in it instead. The boy bowed slightly to Lucius. "Thank you, sir. I do appreciate the help. Mrs. Weasley, hello." "Yes, Mum says hello also, Ginny. You must be excited. Hogwarts is wonderful. Find me in the library on the second night, and I will introduce you to the friend of mine I think you'll like best. Goodbye, Mr. Malfoy. Please give my regards to your wife. Tell her I am still reading the Hesiod translation she recommended." Lucius Malfoy left platform 9 and 3/4 with a small twitch at one corner of his mouth that he would not be able to control for the next 3 days. Lucius Malfoy went home. Lucius Malfoy did not that night write to his master, because Lucius Malfoy could not at that point fully articulate to himself what had just happened. The diary was destroyed in the Wakandan embassy basement that evening at 9:15 local time by Inca with a vibranium ring blade, on the floor of a secure circle the priests of Bast had drawn for the purpose. The diary screamed for a full 40 seconds. Inca was not a woman who minded screams from cursed objects. She finished the work. She brought the boy back 2 Kimoyo beads, small black ones, as souvenirs of the operation, into which the residual sound of the diary had been compressed for later forensic study by the king's researchers. The boy returned to Hogwarts. The second year proceeded without the petrifications that had blighted in an earlier timeline half a school's population. The boy used the year for diplomacy. He invited, with his father's blessing and the Queen Mother's official countersignature, the entire fifth year of Slytherin to a Wakandan cultural week at the embassy in London during the spring holiday. 6 of the 11 students attended. 3 of them came back changed. One of them, a girl named Tracy Davis, whose mother was a Muggle born married into an old pureblood line, and whose home life was, in the boy's quiet assessment, miserable, returned to Hogwarts wearing kimono beads of her own and asking if there was such a thing as a Wakandan postgraduate engineering program. There would be a place reserved for her, the boy told her gently, if her grades and her work justified it in the year 1998. He cultivated Hermione Granger. She visited Wakanda in the summer between her second and third year, on a scholarship from the Office of the King for outstanding magical talent in the British school system, on Erik's direct invitation, with her parents' permission and a parchment of guarantees written by Erik's chief of protocol that left her parents, who were both dentists, with no remaining objections and a number of dinner party stories. She returned with 3 duffel bags of books, 8 technical papers, an honorary courtesy title from the Royal Library at Bernanzana, and a deeply altered conception of what civilization could look like. He cultivated Sirius Black. The cultivation of Sirius Black in the third year took a different shape than it had in the original timeline. In that timeline, the boy had only heard of Sirius in the spring of his third year and had been hunted by him and finally reconciled in a single fraught night in the Shrieking Shack. In this timeline, the boy had known of Sirius since the autumn of his 9th year, when Erik had dug through Devereux into the political record of Britain's most notorious wartime trial, the trial of one Sirius Orion Black, allegedly the betrayer of the Potters, who had been sentenced to Azkaban without trial. Without trial. Erik had read this aloud at the kitchen table to the boy. Erik had said, "Without trial, Kari, they sentenced a man to a magical torture prison for murder without trial. That country don't deserve to call itself a country. Note it. We deal with it." The boy had noted it. The boy had not forgotten. In the spring of the second year, the boy formally requested, through Wakandan diplomatic channels and over the firm cautioning of the head of Wakanda's diplomatic service, that the British Wizarding Ministry of Magic produce, within 30 days, the trial records of Sirius Orion Black for inspection by the office of the Wakandan King. The Wakandan office did not require a reason. The request was filed as a routine matter under the Treaty of Magical Mutual Recognition that Erik had quietly signed with Cornelius Fudge in November of 1991, on terms that had been so favorable to Fudge, vibranium trade access, a personal honorarium of 50,000 galleons paid to a charitable foundation chaired by Fudge's wife, that Fudge had signed without reading the clauses on extradition, prisoner review, and the right to demand documentation of any criminal proceeding involving wizards with magical citizenship status outside the British Isles. The ministry produced no trial records. They produced, eventually in some embarrassment, an admission that no trial had taken place. The Wakandan Diplomatic Service responded with a formal letter co-signed by the King and the Office of Magical Law of Wakanda, demanding the immediate release pending retrial of Sirius Orion Black, citizen of the British wizarding world but legally a person under Wakandan diplomatic protection by special order of the King, who had taken a personal interest in the case as a matter of cousinly courtesy to the boy Kari Njadaka, formerly Harry Potter, ward of one of the few persons capable of fully understanding the magical convention concerning godparents and their legal standing. Sirius Black was released from Azkaban on a wet Tuesday in March of 1993. He emerged thin, hollow-eyed, with the haunted, overgrown look of a man who had been 13 years in a magical prison and could not remember what light was, and he was taken first to the Wakandan embassy, where he was bathed and fed and clothed in clean black wool, and given a low dose of a Wakandan restorative tincture that did in 11 days what magical healing might have done in 11 months. He met the boy at platform 9 3/4 at the end of the Easter holiday. Sirius Black walked up to the boy and looked at him with the eyes of a man who had seen a ghost in a young body and did not yet know how to address it. "James," Sirius said. "And Lily's eyes, Merlin kid, you look." "Hello, Sirius," the boy said in English. He had practiced the line. He bowed slightly. "I am glad to see you well. I have heard much. I am by your law your godson. I am by my own choosing also someone else's son. I would like for both of those things to be true. I think they can be. Would you like to come to Wakanda this summer? My father is curious to meet you." Sirius Black, who had not spoken aloud about James or Lily in 11 years because the Dementors had eaten the words off him, said hoarsely, "I would like that. Yes, pup, I would like that very much." He he met Erik. He sat at Erik's kitchen table, which in Zana was a long, low table of mahogany, in a private dining chamber of the Palace of the Golden Tribe, but which Erik had set in the manner of Telegraph Avenue, with a mismatched tablecloth and a centerpiece of marigolds, and he ate groundnut stew. He ate it again the next night. He cried at one point during a story about James that the boy had asked for. He laughed at another. He began, over the course of 3 weeks, to be a man again. He did not become the boy's primary parent. That position was filled. He understood this and made his peace with it within 48 hours. He became instead an uncle. The boy had not had an uncle. The boy decided he had room for one. Sirius, by August, had begun negotiating with Erik a posting as the Wakandan liaison to the British wizarding press, on the grounds that someone needed to be telling the British wizarding world what was happening in Wakanda. And Sirius could do that, with the cheerful, biting, well-bred contempt for everything pompous that he had been famous for in his school days, and that no 11-year-old, however accomplished, could quite get away with publishing in the Daily Prophet under his own name. The third year proceeded. The Dementors at Hogwarts that year. There had been talk of Dementors stationed at the perimeter following the original belief that Sirius Black was on the loose. But the Dementors had not in fact been deployed, because Sirius Black was now provably no longer a fugitive, and the Wakandan diplomatic service had filed several severe communications about the unacceptability of stationing Dementors near foreign citizens under any circumstances. Were briefly mid-year. Deployed to a corridor outside the staff room for a single inspection by a ministry inspector who had not been warned that the boy was present in the building. The boy felt the Dementors at a distance of 2 corridors. The boy walked toward them, with 2 members of the Dora Milaje on diplomatic protocol who were also resident in the school that quarter as part of an exchange program the boy had personally negotiated. The boy reached the Dementors. The boy looked at them. The boy, who had been trained from age 7 in a particular form of Wakandan emotional discipline that was not quite ecclumency, but was its older cousin, did not feel cold. He felt the Dementors as a small, angry pressure on the inside of his ears, which he disregarded. The boy spoke to them in the kind of voice his father used to drug dealers in the alley behind the panaderia. "Leave." The Dementors hesitated. The boy raised his wand. The boy did not cast a Patronus. The boy cast something that the Patronus charm had been a primitive approximation of. A Wakandan ancestral affirmation spell that the priests of Bast had been refining for 900 years, and which projected, through the resonance of the vibranium core inlaid in the wand, an image of the boy's known dead, arrayed in a line of marble figures the size of giants, in the corridor between the boy and the Dementors, including Lily and James Potter and Njabu, son of Azuri, and a small bright woman in a kente headrap whom the boy had never met but whose photograph he had seen on his father's nightstand and who was Erik's mother, dead of cancer in 1979. The Dementors fled. They fled out of the school. They fled, in fact, off the Hogwarts grounds entirely. They were observed by farmers in the village of Hogsmeade moving in a tight, ragged formation southwest, away from the castle, in a manner not previously recorded in any history of the species. The Dementors did not return to Hogwarts for the duration of the boy's education there. The 4th year was the Triwizard year. The Triwizard tournament had been resurrected in the boy's 3rd year over the objections of about half the staff and the strenuous private misgivings of the Wakandan diplomatic service, for the entertainment of the school and the international prestige of the British wizarding community. The boy was not a candidate. The boy was, by his own diplomatic status, ineligible. The boy was, however, asked by the Ministry of Magic to give a brief introductory speech at the opening feast on behalf of Wakanda, which was sending 3 observers, 2 Dora Milaje and 1 engineer, on 6-month attachment to study the magical implementation of the tournament's various mechanical and beast-related elements. The boy gave the speech in 3 languages, English, Xhosa, and French, the last for the benefit of the Beauxbatons delegation, and was applauded for 19 seconds, which was the longest applause at the opening feast that year. He sat down, he ate, he watched. The cup chose, on the night of the choosing, a Hogwarts student who had not entered. The student was Cedric Diggory. The student also chose, by mistake, a second Hogwarts student. It spat out a second name, and that name was Kari Njadaka. The great hall fell silent. The boy stood up. The boy walked to the front. The boy did not approach the cup. The boy turned to face the staff table. The boy said in clear English, in a voice perfectly steady, "I have not entered the tournament. I am not eligible. I am a Wakandan emissary with sovereign status. I have not consented to this. I will not be participating. The cup has been tampered with. I would suggest a full forensic review by both the Department of Mysteries and the diplomatic service of my own country beginning now. He walked back to his seat. The next day, Wakanda's diplomatic service formally suspended the tournament for 30 days pending investigation. Dumbledore privately concurred. Karkaroff blustered. Madame Maxim asked sensible questions. Bartemius Crouch the Younger apologized as Alastor Moody sweated. Crouch was identified by the Kimoyo trace within 4 days. Crouch was arrested by a joint operation of the Dora Milaje and the British Aurors, the latter led by a young witch named Tonks who had become, as the boy had quietly recommended to Madame Bones at the end of his first year, the new defense against the dark arts professor on a temporary basis. Crouch's interrogation, conducted with the supervision of the Wakandan attaché on magical security, revealed that Lord Voldemort had been, until October of 1991, parasitically resident on the back of a man named Quirinus Quirrell, that he had subsequently been bodiless until a ritual at a graveyard in Little Hangleton, which had been planned for some time in early 1995 and would have required, among other ingredients, the blood of an enemy taken by force, with the intended enemy being the boy. That the cup tampering at the Triwizard Tournament had been intended to deliver the boy to that graveyard, that a Wormtail had been Voldemort's primary human servant, that Wormtail's location was a derelict house in Albania. The Wormtail in the derelict house in Albania was raided 3 days later by the Dora Milaje, with the cooperation of the Albanian Auror Service, which had been briefed by the Wakandan ambassador to Tirana. Peter Pettigrew was taken alive. Fragmentary parasitic remnant of Lord Voldemort in his possession, the bottle-shaped vessel of clay and snake venom, was confiscated and delivered to the Wakandan embassy in London, where it joined the Diary, the Wraith, and a fourth Horcrux, the Ring of Marvolo Gaunt, located in July of that year by a Wakandan magical archaeological team working with a tip from Albus Dumbledore, who had now decided to cooperate fully with Wakandan operations on the matter, and a fifth Horcrux, a locket, located in a London townhouse to which Sirius Black retained title, found in the attic during a renovation, and a sixth Horcrux, a diadem, located in the Room of Requirement at Hogwarts during the boy's diagnostic mapping of the castle in his second year. 6 Horcruxes destroyed by the spring of the boy's 4th year. The 7th remained where it had always been, behind the half-moon scar on the boy's forehead. The boy and his father and the priests of Bast and an elderly goblin nation philosopher named Ragnarok had been corresponding on the subject of the 7th for 18 months. The plan was nearly ready. The plan would in due course be executed. The tournament was permitted to resume after 30 days with the Wakandan delegation overseeing certain procedural reforms. Cedric Diggory won. The boy and Cedric had become friends. Cedric in the previous timeline had died at the cup. In this timeline he did not. There was no cup portkey. The cup was merely a cup. Cedric received his 1,000 galleons and his small bronze trophy and his year of glory in the courtship of one Cho Chang. And Cedric would, 4 years later, go on to a long and useful career as the first British Auror to serve as junior liaison to the Wakandan Magical Security Service, a posting that did not exist in this universe before the boy had personally proposed it in the early summer of his 4th year. Voldemort did not gain a body in the graveyard in Little Hangleton. The graveyard remained empty, but the parasitic remnant of Voldemort had been growing impatient. The Kimoyo signals registered. In the spring of the boy's 4th year, a new movement. The Wraith of Voldemort had pieced itself together from fragments of what Voldemort had distributed in old, hidden places that the Horcruxes had not been the whole of his preparation. The man had been a planner of considerable depth. Even with the Horcruxes gone, he had a reserve of accumulated dark intentions scattered across the Britain he had once tried to rule, and that reserve was beginning to coalesce. By the summer of 1995, Lord Voldemort was a wraith with the strength of a young magical adult, the cunning of his old self, and a fixed obsession. The fixed obsession was the boy. Erik and Bernan Zana in the King's study in the High Tower looked at the Kimoyo report from the boy's 4th year and put both hands flat on the table. He stood, he paced. He went to the Kimoyo, beat at his throat. He opened a channel to the boy. Kari, Baba, you ready? Yes, Baba, I am coming with everybody. I am coming with the Dora Milaje and the King's Border Guard and the engineers and the priests and the Dragonfly Fleet. We end this in your 5th year. We end it on his ground. We give the wizards their war back with us in it. You understand? Yes, Baba. You will be in the school. The school is where he will go. He has no other place. He has been forced to the only place that contains the boy who survived him. He will come for you in the castle. We will be in the castle. We will turn the castle into a country and the country will defend its emissary. You with me? Yes, Baba. I love you, my son. I love you, Baba. Erik closed the channel. Erik turned to Akoi, who was standing at the door of the study. Captain, Your Majesty, we have a deployment. Tell me where. A school in Scotland. Akoi permitted herself a single small lift of one eyebrow. To save it, and to make a point. Wakanda goes to war beside the children of its allies. We don't sit anymore. Get the mill-age ready. Get the engineers. Get the dragonflies. Tell my brother I want him invited. We will reach him through the embassy at Cape Town. Tell Njabu's old circle in London I want them on the ground in Hogsmeade by the end of the month. Tell Hermione Granger I want her on the Wakandan side of the planning room. Tell Sirius Black I am coming through London on Tuesday, and he is to be ready to escort me to my godson's school as a man who knows the way. Tell the world we are not hiding anymore. It will be done, my king. Wakanda forever, Wakanda forever. In the summer between the boy's second and third year, the boy attended a wedding. The wedding was Erik's. Erik had not in 7 years on Telegraph Avenue told the boy he was seeing anyone. Erik had not, in the year of the throne, particularly told the boy either. Erik had in fact met the woman in question, Io, 26 years old, formerly of the Dora Mill-age, now retired from active service and working in the King's Chamberlain's office on the question of which non-Wakandan persons could be granted refuge in Wakanda, and on what terms in the autumn after his coronation at a state dinner, where they had conducted a 4-hour disagreement on a point of refugee policy and emerged, by mutual surprise, with a working partnership and a small private willingness to continue the conversation. The willingness had continued. The conversation had continued. By the early summer of the boy's second year, the willingness had become an engagement, which Erik had announced to the boy by Kimoyo during a Sunday afternoon in May, in a tone that Erik had not used in any other conversation the boy had ever heard from him, which was the tone of a man who was not certain he was going to be permitted what he was asking for. The boy had been silent for several seconds on the Kimoyo line. Baba, the boy had finally said, are you asking me? Yes, 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 what? Yes, you have my permission, although you don't need it. And yes, I think this is a good thing, and yes, I am happy, and yes, I am crying, but the crying is the good kind, and Baba, yes. Erik had been silent on the other end of the Kimoyo for some time. Then Erik had said, you like her, Kari. I like her. I have liked her since she taught me the alternate parry at the embassy 3 months ago. I like her because she does not pretend I am a child, and she does not pretend I am an adult. I like her because she does not pretend at all in any direction. I like her because I have seen her with you, Baba, even in the few hours I have, and you are different around her. You are a little less the king. You are a little more, I do not know the English word. The Kosa word is anabubel, the man who is gentle without being weak. You are more him around her. I want you to be more him. I want it for you. Yes, Baba, yes. The wedding took place at Warrior Falls in late June. The rock on which Erik had defeated T'Challa 2 years before was washed clean, garlanded with marigolds, and stood under by the 5 tribes. T'Challa returned from Marseille for the wedding. T'Challa stood at Erik's right shoulder. The boy stood at Erik's left. Erik had told the boy the night before in his small private quarters that he had no greater honor to ask of the boy than to stand on the rock with him in the place where 2 years before the boy had cast the small misdirection spell that had won them their country. Where the robes I had made, Erik had said. What robes? The Wakandan child of the king robes. Shuri made them. They are red. They are black. They have the script of the golden tribe on the hem. They have a small piece of vibranium in the collar. The boy had worn the robes. He had stood on the rock. He had handed Erik the wedding ring at the appropriate moment of the ceremony. The ring was a band of vibranium with no panther on it, plain. Io had requested plain, engraved on the inside in Kosa with a single word, Ndim, which meant simply I am. The 5 tribes had cheered. The boy had not cried at the ceremony. He had cried at the reception on a hillside under an awning of woven palm when Io had come over with 2 glasses of pomegranate juice. Neither she nor Erik drank alcohol and had sat down next to him on the grass and had said in Kosa, I am not your mother. I will not try to be. Your mother is 2 people and they were both extraordinary, and one of them was Lily Evans, who died for you, and the other is your father, who has been doing the work of 2 people since you came to him. I will be your mother of the 3rd kind. I will be the one who comes after. I will not replace anything. I will simply add, is this acceptable? The boy had not been able to answer for a moment. The boy had wiped his face. Then the boy had said in Kosa, Sawubona, mama. Io had said in Kosa, Yibo Sawubona, son. She had become his mother. She would be his mother for the rest of her life. The complexities of 3-parent households, Erik, Io, and the figure of Lily in the photograph Erik kept always on the mantle of every dwelling, were complexities the boy and his parents would navigate together with care and humor for the rest of the parents' lives, and the boy would be the better for it. In the autumn of the boy's 3rd year, Io bore a daughter. The daughter was named after a long family discussion that included the boy Kethio Njadaka, Kethio meaning the chosen one, and she was, by the law of the household, the boy's full sister. The boy held her on the 2nd day of her life. She fit asleep in the crook of his elbow. The boy looked down at her. The boy spoke to her in Kosa very softly. Sawubona sister, I am Kari, I am your older brother. I will teach you the forms when you are old enough to hold a spear but not before. I will teach you to read the script of the Golden Tribe, but you will learn other scripts first. You are not me, you must not be made to be me. I will teach you the Kosa lullaby that your mother sang me in the embassy in London when I had a bad night last March. I will teach you, most importantly, that you can ask any question of any person, including me, and the question will be welcome. Even if the question is hard. The hard questions are the ones that mean, you will be hard, I will love you, I see you. Sawubona, the infant Kethio had not yet learned to make any noise but the small noises of an infant. She made one such noise. Erik, standing in the doorway watching, did not make a sound at all, because the noise that wished to come out of his own throat would not have been a useful one in front of the baby. There was, in the boy's third year, an incident at Christmas that was not in any of the formal records of his schooling, and which the boy would later regard as the moment he understood, for the first time, the full weight of what he carried. He had remained at Hogwarts for the Christmas of his third year, in part because his sister Kethio was 9 months old, and his stepmother Io had insisted by Kimoyo that he take a winter break that did not involve a colicky baby, and in part because he had been invited to a private tea in the headmaster's office on Christmas Day with 3 other guests, whom Dumbledore had described in the invitation only as individuals whose acquaintance I believe you would value. The 3 other guests were Nicholas Flamel, 665 years old, in a dark blue robe, and a pair of small spectacles he did not need, but had taken to wearing for the sake of appearing his age, Perenelle Flamel, his wife, the same age, in a robe of dark green and a hat with a small silver pin, and an old woman the boy did not know, who was introduced only as Madame Lufkin, late of Tunis, formerly of Wakanda, current age unknown. The tea was poured. The mince pies were distributed. Nicholas Flamel, after the first courteous 15 minutes, looked at the boy and said, "I have heard of you, young man. I am honored, sir. You destroyed an object my wife and I had spent 600 years protecting. Sir, the stone. Albus has informed us that the stone was in your first year briefly the target of a rather inconvenient interest. We had asked him to keep it for a time at the school. We had not asked him to expose it to a parasitic dark wizard. We had certainly not asked him to expose it to a child. The whole arrangement, in retrospect, was characteristic of Albus. He has always been, my dear, more devoted to the dramatic gesture than to the secure custody." Dumbledore did not protest. Dumbledore in this timeline had begun to take this kind of criticism with the philosophical patience of a man who knew he deserved it. "Sir," the boy said, "I did not destroy the stone. The stone was removed from the school in November of my first year intact and returned to your possession. I confirmed the chain of custody with my father's office. I have a Kimoyo receipt I can share if it would be useful." Nicholas Flamel smiled. "I am teasing you, young man. The stone is well. I merely wish to see how you would respond to an accusation made by a man whose authority would be difficult for you to dispute. You responded by appealing to the documentation. This is correct. This is the only correct response. Many men of your age, faced with such an accusation by such a senior, would have apologized for things they had not done or denied things in tones that would have suggested guilt. You went to the receipt. We will be friends, you and I would like that, sir. My wife and I are retiring. Sir, this year, we will not this year renew the stone's recipe. We will allow ourselves to age. We will in a few years' time die. We have decided. We have lived long enough." "I am sorry to hear it, sir." "No, you are not. You are intrigued, be honest." The boy considered. "I am intrigued and sorry both, sir. The sorry is for you and your wife, who I have only known for 15 minutes but who I respect. The intrigued is because I had not realized you had been considering it. May I ask, without intrusion, why now?" "Because the world we made the stone for is ending. The world we are entering is yours. The stone was a thing for a world in which only a small number of wizards could conceivably wish to live a very long time. The world that is coming will have more vibranium and more magical engineering in it than the world that is going. The longevity questions of the future will not be solved by an alchemical philosopher's stone made by a Frenchman and his wife in a basement in Paris in the 1350s. They will be solved by the kind of work being done in your cousin Shuri's laboratory. We are passing the baton." The boy looked at him. "Sir, may I ask, may I see the stone?" "You may not, but I will give you something else." Nicholas Flamel reached into the inside pocket of his robe. He produced a small leather-bound book, no larger than a deck of cards. He laid it on the table. "This is the notebook," he said, "I kept in Paris during the autumn of 1357, in which I worked out by trial and error the final 2 chemical steps of the stone's process. It is not the recipe, it is the reasoning behind the recipe. The recipe is a thing of magic, the reasoning is a thing of thought. I would like you to have the thought. The thought is more useful in the long run than the recipe." The boy did not move for a moment. The boy looked at the notebook. The boy understood, with the part of himself that had been trained for 10 years to understand such things, that he was being handed an object of incalculable scholarly value, and that the proper response was not to refuse it. Sir, the boy said, I accept, I will read it. I will, with your permission, share it with my cousin Shuri and with my teacher Professor Snape. I will not publish it, I will use it. The using will be private. That is the correct answer. Thank you, sir. You are welcome, son of Njadaka. Madame Lufkin, who had not spoken yet, set down her teacup. Kari, she said in Kosa, I knew your grandfather, I knew your father. I knew your father's brother's wife, who is the woman who taught my mother to read. I am from Wakanda by way of 3 exiles and a marriage. I have lived in Tunis since 1948. I have been your father's spymaster in North Africa for 11 years. I am by my own request and his courtesy now retiring. I have come tonight to meet the child who will, with his father, finish the work my generation has only begun. I see you, child, Sawubona. Yibo, the boy said in Kosa with both hands in his lap. Sawubona, mother of my house. Madame Lufkin reached across the table. She took the boy's right hand. She turned it over. She traced a small pattern in the palm with one finger that the boy did not know but felt in his palm as a small warm pulse that ran up his arm into his chest. You are sealed, she said in Kosa. By the right of my mother's mother, by the right of an old woman who has earned it. You will not be touched by any working of dark magic for the remainder of your days that is not first slowed by my house's prayer. It will not stop the working. It will buy you 1 second. 1 second is enough, child. 1 second is what your mother spent for you. 1 second is what you will spend one day for someone of yours. We will all be there when you do. The boy could not speak. Madame Lufkin released his hand. Now drink your tea, child, and we will all talk of small things for an hour. They did. They talked of small things, the Flamel's garden in Paris, Madame Lufkin's 6 grandchildren in Tunis, Dumbledore's recent attempt to learn to ski, which had gone badly. The boy's small sister Kethio, who had, according to a Kimoyo dispatch the boy had received that morning, just learned to say the word Kari in a voice that her mother believed to be deeply specific to the boy and to no other syllable. The party ended at 9. The boy walked back to the Slytherin common room with the notebook in his pocket and Madame Lufkin's seal in his palm and a kind of new gravity in his chest that he could not yet name. He sat by the fire. Draco Malfoy was reading in the next chair. Pansy Parkinson was on the floor in front of the fire eating a mince pie. Theo Knott was at the window watching the snow. How was the tea? Draco said without looking up. Useful, the boy said. You have a notebook in your pocket. I have several notebooks. Which one? The one I do not recognize, the small leather one. You are touching it through the cloth repeatedly. That is the gesture of a man who has just been given something he does not entirely know what to do with. The boy stopped touching the notebook through the cloth. You are observant tonight, Malfoy. I am always observant. I am usually quiet about it. Is the notebook a problem? Number the notebook is a gift from a man whose generation is ending. Ah, a handoff. Yes, you have been handed a great many things this year, Kari. The boy looked at him. Draco was, by the end of the second year, calling the boy Kari in private. The boy had not asked him to. Draco had decided. The boy had accepted. I have. Do you ever fear that you will be handed more than you can carry? Yes. What do? I drink tea, I sleep 8 hours, I write to my father, I write to my sister who is 9 months old and cannot read. I do the forms in the morning before the school wakes. I read a book that has nothing to do with my project. I am in those moments deliberately just a boy. Does it work? Most of the time, some days it does not. On the days it does not, I tell my father and my father makes a small adjustment, which is sometimes a joke and sometimes a serious conversation, and sometimes a Kimoyo call that goes on for an hour. You are very lucky in your father. The boy looked at Draco. Draco was looking at the fire. Draco's father, Lucius Malfoy, was at that exact moment, the boy knew from intelligence reports, in a hotel in Vienna trying to broker a small illegal sale of 7 enchanted snuff boxes to a wizard whose name had been on a Wakandan watch list since 1989. Draco knew this also in some shape, although Draco had not been formally briefed. Yes, the boy said, I am very lucky in my father. Some of us are lucky. Some of us are not. The luck is not earned. The unlucky deserve no less honor than the lucky. The work for the unlucky is to find new fathers in the world where they can. The work is not always finished by the men who bore us. Sometimes it is finished by the men who choose us. You will find some, Draco. You are already finding them. Draco did not look at the boy. Snape, Draco said. Snape sometime. Other men also. My father perhaps eventually. He has met you. He has read about you. He has formed an opinion. The opinion is not. The opinion is that there is a Draco Malfoy who can be a man and a Draco Malfoy who can be his father's son, and that you will have to decide. You have time. You are 13. The decision is years away, but the decision is yours. Draco did not respond for a long time. Draco eventually set down his book. "Thank you, Kari. You are welcome, Draco." They sat by the fire. Pansy Parkinson finished her mince pie. The snow continued. The night went on. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The Battle of Hogwarts. On the morning of the day the war ended, the boys stood on the high battlement of the astronomy tower at 5:12 in the morning local time and watched the dragonflies come in low over the loch. There were 40 of them. They flew in a Wakandan combat fan formation, 3 abreast in the first 3 ranks, 4 abreast in the next 4. The last rank a single command vessel painted in the gold and black of the Golden Tribe with the panther sigil on its underside the size of a small house. The fleet did not announce itself by sound. Wakandan engines did not announce themselves by sound, but the kimoyo bead on the boy's wrist hummed in the recognition of allied transponders, and the dawn light caught for an instant on a single banner that streamed from the command vessel as it came over the school's wards, and the banner was red, and the banner had on it in the script of the Golden Tribe the word home. The boy permitted himself, for the first and last time that day, the privilege of a smile. Beside him, in the high battlement under the lightening sky, stood Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore had aged a great deal in the last 4 years. The aging had not been all bad. Some of it had been the simple aging of a man who had begun to do, late in life, the kind of work he should have been doing all along. Some of it had been the cost of doing that work. The blackened hand on which he wore his ring had not been blackened in this timeline. The ring had been a Horcrux delivered to him by the Wakandan archaeological team and destroyed without the curse ever touching him. But he was still old and he was still tired, and he held his elder wand loosely in his right hand, and he watched the dragonflies come in over the loch with the expression of an old chess player who has, with great difficulty and against his nature, brought himself to invite a stronger player to the board. "Your father has come," Dumbledore said. "My father has come," the boy said, "and he has brought a country. He has. I have not, I think, been wholly correct, Mr. Potter, about a great many things in my life. I have not, sir, been wholly correct about a great many things in mine. You are 15, and you are 115. The age differences I have decided irrelevant to the equity of our error rates." Dumbledore laughed in the dawn on the battlement. It was the first time the boy had heard him laugh that meant it. "Tom is coming, Mr. Potter." "I know, sir. He is on the avenue at the southern edge of the Forbidden Forest now. He has perhaps 400. They are mostly old Death Eater families. He has also acquired 3 giants and approximately 70 in fairy. He has also been joined by a small detachment of Dementors who have, over the last 3 months, regrouped under a new patriarch and decided to commit themselves on his side, on the basis that they have nowhere else to be. He is moving slowly because he is bringing the giants overland from the coast. He will arrive at the school's perimeter wards at approximately 7:40 this morning. He believes he has surprised us. He believes the school is undefended save for the Order of the Phoenix, which his intelligence places at 23 combatants. He has not been informed of the Wakandan fleet. He has not been informed of the Beauxbatons delegation, which arrived 2 nights ago under the cover of a state visit. He has not been informed of the Goblin Nation's 11 volunteer detachments which are at this moment dispersing into the school's lower passages. He has not been informed of the Centaurs of the Forbidden Forest who have, after a long meeting last night which I am told was unusually civil, elected to fight. He does not know that the school has been turned into a fortress. He thinks he is arriving at a prep school. He thinks he is meeting children. We will not allow him to think anything in particular for very long. Dumbledore looked at the boy. "You have, Mr. Potter," he said, "thought of everything. I had 4 years and a father, sir. The father is the part you didn't have. That is becoming clearer to me by the day." The command dragonfly settled on the lawn outside the great oak doors of Hogwarts in a near-silent landing that left the dew unbroken in a 10-meter radius around it. The hatch opened. Erik Stevens stepped down. The King of Wakanda was in armor. The armor was the new design of King Njadaka, fabricated by Shuri's research division in the last 6 months. Full vibranium body armor, golden, with a long sleeveless overcoat of dark panther hide pooling at the heels, with the ring of Njadaka on the right hand and the small kimoyo dashboard on the left wrist, with 2 folded ring blades at the belt, with the leopard headdress of the King of the Golden Tribe on his head. He came down the ramp. Behind him came the Dora Milaje. There were 200 of them. They came in 10 ranks of 20, with Okoye at the head, with Inca at her left shoulder, with the standard of the Milaje carried in the right hand of a junior named Io, who was on her first overseas deployment, and who would, by 10 o'clock that morning, be promoted. The Milaje carried vibranium spears. They wore vibranium body armor in the red of their order. Their heads were shaven. Their eyes did not blink. Behind the Milaje came the border tribe. There were 300 of them in the blue capes of their order, with the vibranium energy shields concealed within the cape's lining, with their long curved kufi spears. Behind the border tribe came the Jabari, who had been persuaded by their leader M'Baku to participate in this engagement after a long evening of conversation with King Njadaka in M'Baku's mountain hall. There were 100 of the Jabari. They carried wooden clubs reinforced with vibranium cores. Their leader walked in the front. He was a head taller than every other man on the field. Behind the Jabari came the engineers in their gray work coats with their tool belts and their portable Kimoyo control panels and their small flying repair beetles already swarming the air around their shoulders. Behind the engineers came the priests of Bast in their orange robes, 6 of them with Zuri the high priest in the lead, carrying a small box that contained the 6 destroyed Horcruxes and one more thing besides. And behind all of these, the King Erik Njadaka of Wakanda walked alone for the last 20 paces to the great oak doors of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and the doors opened and the boy stood in the doorway. Erik stopped. The boy stepped down. They met on the gravel. Erik went to one knee. The Dora middle-aged 200 of them went to one knee behind him. The border tribe, 300 of them, lowered their kufi spears. The Jabari bowed their heads. The engineers paused their beetles. The priests stood. "My son," Erik said in Kosa. "Baba," the boy said in Kosa, "I have come. I see you." "Yibo," Erik said, "I see you too." He stood. He embraced the boy. He held him a long moment against the gold of his armor, and the boy felt the Kimoyo beat at his father's throat hum against his cheek, and the boy permitted himself again the small luxury of breathing as a son. Then Erik released him. "Voldemort is coming," Erik said in English now, because the audience he was speaking to from this moment forward included the British wizards on the steps. "We will receive him. Captain Akoy, you have the south wall. Take Inca and 100 millage and hold the south wall against the giants. The other 100 under Aya will move to support the lake. The border tribe will deploy in 2 wings on the lawn between us and the forest. W. Kabai has the right wing. Inca's brother Mkathu has the left. Jabari with M'Baku in reserve at the great oak doors. Engineers operating the perimeter ward augmentation and a defensive vibranium dome over the great hall, which will be the field hospital. Priests of Bast in the highest tower with the box of Horcruxes for the final operation. Headmaster Dumbledore, sir, your Order of the Phoenix is asked to deploy along the corridors of the 2nd and 3rd floors, supporting student evacuation toward the kitchens, which are the most defensible internal redoubt. Professor McGonagall, my office has prepared a written set of dueling pairings between your students and the Wakandan engineers' protective beetle swarms. Please collect those from Inca in the next 10 minutes. Madame Maxime, the Beauxbatons girls have been requested to operate the school's eastern flank with the centaurs. M'Baku has identified your Captain Fleur de Lacquer as a serviceable commander, and your Captain Fleur de Lacquer has briefed me on her placement of charm tripwires in the Forbidden Forest, which I expect to disrupt the Inferi advance. Karkaroff's Durmstrang detachment will hold the western flank, although several of his older boys may attempt to defect to Voldemort in the next hour and should be watched. Hagrid, sir, your magical creatures have a particular role. You have been briefed. You know what to do. The British Aurors under Madame Bones will take the inner ring, which is the central courtyard. Tonks, you have command of the courtyard. Kingsley Shacklebolt is on the astronomy tower with my son and the priests for the final operation. Sirius Black is with me. He will be at my left through the entire engagement. Remus Lupin is in the kitchens with the children. The House Elves of Hogwarts have, by their own request, been issued small vibranium daggers and will defend the lower passages alongside the Goblin Volunteers. Their commander is one Dobby of Wakanda, who will receive his commission on the field today. Any questions? There were no questions. Wakanda forever, Erik said. Wakanda forever. Every Wakandan voice answered, in a wave that ran from the front rank to the rear and rolled back in a long, low echo over the gravel. The Order of the Phoenix, who had been standing on the steps of the school in the long pre-dawn cold for the last hour, watching this entire arrival, looked at one another. Minerva McGonagall, after a pause, stepped forward and said in her dry, sharp voice, "Hogwarts forever." The Order said after her with rather more conviction than they had been expecting to muster, "Hogwarts forever." Erik bowed to her. "Hogwarts forever, headmistress-to-be," he said. "Now, with respect, ma'am, the man is coming. Take your positions." The man came at 22 minutes past 7. He came on the back of a giant. The giant was 26 feet tall. The giant carried a club made of the trunk of a yew. The man was thin, white as a corpse, robed in black, with the face of a serpent and the eyes of a person who had not slept in 14 years for any reason that had to do with the body. He carried the wand he had carried on the night he had killed Lily and James Potter, which was not the Elder Wand. That wand was in Dumbledore's hand on the battlement, and would, by the events of the next 90 minutes, never be in any other hand again but a 13.5-inch yew with a single phoenix tail feather, the brother of the wand in the boy's holster. The man came up the avenue. The Death Eaters came behind him. The Inferi shambled at the edges. The Dementors hovered in the dawn at a polite distance. The army was 470 strong, 500 when the Inferi were counted. The Dementors, by formal Wakandan diplomatic count, did not count as they were not legally military. The Wakandan and Hogwartian defense numbered, by formal count, 812 combatants plus 74 house elves, 12 goblin volunteers, 28 centaurs, and 1 black market Hungarian horntail that Hagrid had been persuaded by Erik to introduce as a personal favor. The man stopped at the perimeter ward. The Wakandan engineers had reinforced the perimeter ward with a vibranium induction halo. The halo had not been visible from the avenue. It became visible at the moment the man's giant pushed against it. The halo flared, briefly, gold, the color of the king. The giant fell backward as if he had walked into a barn door. The man dismounted. The man, Lord Voldemort, in his thin black robe with his wand of yew, walked forward to the perimeter. The perimeter held. He raised his wand. He spoke a spell whose name was not in any British curriculum, which had been excised from the printed books of dark magic in 1879, and survived only in a manuscript in the personal library of the Lestrange family in the south of France, which Voldemort had read in his youth and which he had been holding in reserve for the moment of his return. The halo, though, was not in any of his books. The spell hit the halo, and the halo absorbed it. The halo passed the absorbed energy along the perimeter to a vibranium ring blade that was, at that precise instant, in the right hand of Inca of the Dora Millage, 54 meters to the southwest. Inca, who had been waiting for it, who had been informed at 6 o'clock that morning by the chief engineer that the perimeter would be passing her exactly 7 such transferred curses over the course of the engagement, threw the ring blade. The ring blade hit the leftmost of the 3 giants in the throat. The giant fell. The giant did not get up. The man's army began the assault. The Battle of Hogwarts took 2 hours and 38 minutes. The Inferi were burned by the centaurs at the eastern flank with the help of the Beauxbatons girls' targeted fiendfire, which Fleur de Lacre controlled with the precise small smile of a witch who had not, prior to that morning, been allowed to demonstrate her competence to a battlefield. The Dementors were driven back by a coordinated Patronus charge from the assembled Aurors, the older students, and a triple resonance pulse from the priests of Bast on the battlement. The Patronus charge was led by Tonks, whose Patronus that morning was, in a thing she had not been expecting, a panther. The giants were brought down by the Dora Millage in the 2nd hour, 2 of them in single combat, the 3rd by Hagrid riding the Hungarian horntail with a long Wakandan issue spear and a series of obscenities in 3 languages. The Death Eaters fought hard. They fought with the dark and clever spellwork of a circle that had been training in secret for 14 years. They fought with the certainty of those who had been told they would inherit a regime. They fought against the Wakandan combined arms doctrine, against the border tribes' energy shields, against the engineers' beetle swarms, which had been programmed to recognize the dark mark on the inside of the left arm and to disable that arm's nervous control on contact, which they did in sequence to 71 Death Eaters in the first 30 minutes of the engagement. And against the older students of Hogwarts who had come down from the kitchens in the 2nd half hour against direct instructions to stay back, because the older students had decided, in a brief democratic conversation that was conducted half in shouting and half in tears, that they were not children, and that this was their school, and that they would not let it be defended without them. Neville Longbottom personally took the surrender of 3 Death Eaters in the southern courtyard. He held them at wand point with a jinx the boy had taught him in his first year. He waited for the Aurors to take them. He did not lower his wand for the 8 minutes it took the Aurors to arrive. Hermione Granger, who had been deployed to the kitchens with the younger children, broke discipline at minute 40 and led the 3rd-year girls onto the 2nd floor to assist with the wounded. Draco Malfoy, who had been faced with his father across a corridor in the 3rd hour, performed the small act of patricide that several centuries of Malfoy fathers had probably deserved by lifting his wand and stunning his father from behind, and then sat down on the floor next to the unconscious Lucius and put his head in his hands and stayed there until Pansy Parkinson and Theo Knott came and got him. Sirius Black, who had been at Eric's left through the entire engagement as promised, took a curse meant for Erik in the 2nd hour and lived, because the vibranium underlayer of his diplomatic robes, which Erik had, with quiet foresight, insisted Sirius wear that morning, absorbed it. Sirius spent the next 4 minutes recovering, and the next 45 minutes fighting Bellatrix Lestrange in a duel that Sirius, having spent 6 months in Wakandan sword training under Inca, eventually won by disarming and stunning her in a sequence she had not been trained to defend against because the sequence had not been known in Britain. Bellatrix was taken to the courtyard and chained. The dragon ate 2 of the giants. The centaurs took the rest of the dementors. The house elves, with Dobby in front of them in a small piece of vibranium chest armor that had been fitted for him at the embassy 2 months before, defended the lower passages so completely that nothing alive, dead, or magical got past the second corridor for the entire engagement. The man Voldemort in the second hour finally penetrated the Wakandan perimeter on the 7th attempt, after the perimeter had been worn down by sustained group casting from his inner circle. He came onto the lawn. He came toward the great oak doors. Erik met him. They fought on the lawn for 9 minutes. They fought wand against ring blade and spell against spear haft and curse against shield. Erik's vibranium armor absorbed each curse and discharged it, in a manner the engineers had calibrated for the precise frequencies of dark magic, into the lawn beneath them, which by the 7th discharge had been scorched into a circle of black glass with Erik at its center. The boy on the astronomy tower watched. The boy on the astronomy tower, in his Hogwarts robes with the green and silver of Slytherin, with the Kimoyo beads on both wrists, with the holly wand sheathed in vibranium in his right hand and a small vibranium ring blade in his left, with Kingsley Shacklebolt on his left shoulder and Zuri the High Priest of Bast on his right, watched his father and his enemy on the lawn below. Zuri said quietly, "My lord, it is time." "It is time," the boy said. He stepped to the parapet. He looked down. He looked at his father. He looked at his enemy. He raised his wand. He spoke the spell. The spell, the long-prepared, 18-month developed Priests of Bast and Goblin Philosopher and Wakandan Research and Albus Dumbledore-corrected operation, drew the 7th Horcrux out of the boy's forehead and into the small vibranium box in Zuri's hand. The boy fell. He fell on the floor of the astronomy tower. He did not lose consciousness. He had been told he would not lose consciousness. He had been told he would lose nothing, in fact, except a small piece of dark soul that had been growing in his head since the age of 15 months and which, in another timeline, would have killed him. He felt cold for 40 seconds. Then he felt warm. Then he felt, for the first time in his life, light. He had not known he had been carrying a weight. He had only known he had been carrying it, in the way a man who has worn the same boots for 10 years does not know his feet hurt until he puts them in the river. He stood. He went to the parapet. Down on the lawn, Voldemort was wandless. Erik had disarmed him in the 9th minute. Voldemort was on his knees. His wand was in Erik's left hand. Voldemort screamed. The scream was not the scream of a man. It was the scream of the last remaining piece of will of a soul that had been pruned 6 times in the last 4 years and now a 7th of every Horcrux it had distributed. The scream went up into the sky over Hogwarts. Voldemort raised one hand. Voldemort hissed the killing curse. He did not need a wand for the killing curse if his will were great enough, and his will for this last moment was great enough. The green light burst from his palm. The green light went toward the king of Wakanda on the lawn. Erik did not move. Erik did not need to move. The vibranium of his armor took the curse. The curse hit the chest plate. The chest plate, designed by Shuri, the princess of Wakanda, the cousin of the king, in close consultation with the priests of Bast on the matter of how a piece of weaponized soul interacted with a resonant metallic medium, did exactly what it had been designed to do. It absorbed the curse. It re-emitted the curse along a specific frequency. The specific frequency was the one tuned to the resonance signature of Tom Marvolo Riddle, son of Tom Riddle Sr. and Merope Gaunt, born 31st of December 1926, last surviving fragment of a soul that had once been a man. The curse returned to its sender. Voldemort died on the lawn of Hogwarts at 9:58 in the morning local time on the 2nd of May, 1996, of a killing curse from his own hand, which had been gently returned to him by the chest plate of a king who had not been born when Voldemort had first murdered a child. The body fell. The body did not rise. The Death Eaters who remained surrendered, dropped their wands, or attempted to flee in roughly equal numbers. Those who fled were taken by the Wakandan Engineers beetles within 400 meters of the perimeter. Those who surrendered were chained. Those who dropped their wands were arrested. The battle was over. Erik stood on the lawn. He looked up at the astronomy tower. The boy looked down. Erik raised his hand. The boy raised his. Erik walked across the lawn slowly through the dead and the wounded and the kneeling and the engineers already directing the beetle swarms to triage. He walked into the great oak doors. He walked up the stairs. He walked up to the astronomy tower. Zuri the high priest met him at the door. Zuri said, "He is well, my king. He is more than well. He is whole." Erik went past him. He went to the boy. The boy was standing at the parapet, looking out over the loch. The dragonflies were already beginning the second formation of the day, which was the medical and evacuation formation. The school's wounded were being lifted to the field hospital in the Great Hall and beyond, to the Dragonfly Fleet for the more serious cases. The sun was up. The grass was scorched in the circle of black glass where Erik had stood. The body of Voldemort was being processed by the priests of Bast on the lawn for its final disposition, which would involve no funeral, no grave, and no remembrance. The British Wizarding Ministry had insisted on this, and the Wakandan delegation had concurred. Erik came up behind the boy. He laid one hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy did not turn. The boy looked at the lock. The boy said, "I'm tired, Baba. I know. I want to go home. I know. Telegraph or burn in Zana?" Erik considered the question. He considered it for a long time. He considered perhaps the entire length of time it had taken him to walk up the astronomy tower stairs. He had, after all, two homes himself, and the question of which was the true one was a question that no king of Wakanda in this particular generation would be permitted the luxury of avoiding. "Both," he said, "always both. We go to burn in Zana for the official return. The council and the people deserve to see you in your own city. Then we go to Oakland. Inkaniezi has been fed, but she is missing you. The Panaderia opened a new flavor of concha last month that Brother Daniel said you would want to try. The roof of the apartment over the laundry still has the same mats. We spar in the morning, we read in the evening. We come back to Wakanda for the council in the autumn. We come back to Britain whenever the British need their emissary who is also a healer, who is also a king's son. Both, always both. You don't gotta pick." The picking was the old country's idea. The picking ain't ours. The boy turned. The boy was crying. The boy had not cried this morning on the lawn, on the parapet, during the spell, during the long 4 years that had ended this morning. The boy was crying now. The crying was, Erik registered, not grief and not shock and not exhaustion. The crying was simply the body of a 15-year-old being a 15-year-old for the first time in a long while. Erik allowed it. Erik permitted himself, while it lasted, the particular indignity of weeping a little himself. Two of them stood on the astronomy tower of Hogwarts in the May sunlight, the King of Wakanda and his son, with the wind off the lock in their hair and the smoke of the engagement curling away to the east, and Erik permitted himself to be, for 2 minutes, simply a father. Then he stepped back. He cleared his throat. He looked at the boy with the small, fierce smile that the boy had first seen across a kitchen on Telegraph Avenue 8 years before. "Wakanda forever, my son," he said. The boy wiped his eyes. The boy smiled. The boy said, "Wakanda forever, Baba." They walked down the astronomy tower stairs together. On the lawn, Okoye had already begun the inventory of the dead. The Wakandan toll was 17, including 3 Dora Milaje, 2 border tribe, and 1 engineer. The British wizarding toll was 41, mostly order. The Death Eater toll was 103. The civilian wounded was 312, all expected to recover. The dragon had returned to its handlers without injury. The house elves had taken no casualties at all, on the grounds that they were small and quick, and had been underestimated by every dark wizard who had ever encountered them. The body of Voldemort had been disposed of. The remains, by Wakandan ritual, had been reduced to inert ash, and the ash divided into 7 small lead boxes which would, over the course of the next decade, be deposited in 7 different oceans, in 7 different hemispheres, with 7 different ritual seals laid over them by the priests of Bast, so that no fragment of his soul could ever again touch the world. The astronomy tower clock rang 10. The Kimoyo beat at the boy's throat hummed. He listened to it. He smiled. He looked at his father. "Baba," he said, "Cousin T'Challa is on the channel. Put him through." The boy held out his wrist. The voice of the Prince of Wakanda, lately exiled in Marseille, where he had spent the last 4 years studying engineering in a quiet European peace, came over the Kimoyo speaker. "Brother, brother, I heard," T'Challa said. "The whole world is hearing. The whole world is going to be hearing. Hard rain coming, brother. Are we ready for it?" Erik looked at his son. Erik looked at the smoking lawn. Erik looked at the great oak doors of Hogwarts, where the headmistress-to-be Professor McGonagall was at this moment shaking the hand of the captain of the Dora Milaje, and assuring her that no, the school would not need to close, and that the spring exams would, by their joint determination, proceed on schedule, and that the children of Hogwarts would, in the year to come, be receiving in their curriculum a new compulsory subject called Comparative Magical Civics. Designed by the Wakandan Diplomatic Service and the British Ministry of Magic in joint consultation, which would teach the next generation of British wizards something about the world. Erik looked at all this. He looked at the morning. He said, "Ready as we'll ever be, brother. Come home, bring your engineering degree. We got work." "On my way," T'Challa said. "Wakanda forever." "Wakanda forever," said Erik Njadaka, King of Wakanda, and Kari Njadaka, his son, who was also Harry James Potter, the boy who lived and the boy who chose, and the boy who, on the 2nd day of May in the year 1996, on the lawn of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in the morning of a war he had spent a third of his life preparing to win, walked down the steps of the astronomy tower with his father's hand on his shoulder, and, for the first time in a very long time, did not have to be anywhere in particular for anyone but himself. He looked at the sun, he looked at the lock, he looked at the smoke clearing, he looked at his father. He said, "Let's go home." They went. The end. There was one more moment from the war that ought to be set down. It is the moment, in the second hour of the Battle of Hogwarts, in the corridor outside the kitchens, when Dobby, promoted that morning to the field rank of captain of the Hogwarts House Elf Auxiliary, in a small ceremony presided over by Inca of the Dora Milaje, with a single grain of golden vibranium pinned to his chest as the only Wakandan military decoration ever issued to a house elf, held the lower passage of the school against 3 Death Eaters. The Death Eaters were Macnair, Avery, and a younger man called Rookwood, who had been sent down by Voldemort's lieutenants to flank the engagement by taking the kitchens and slaughtering the younger children who had been evacuated there. They had not been informed of the lower passage's defense. They had assumed the lower passage would be unguarded. They had walked 3 abreast into the corridor outside the kitchens at minute 1:34 of the second hour. They had encountered Dobby. Dobby was 30 inches tall. Dobby wore a small piece of vibranium armor, sized by the Wakandan engineers for his frame. Dobby held in his right hand a vibranium-bladed kitchen knife, of the sort the Wakandan engineers had been forging in their portable field forges in the hours before dawn. Dobby was alone in the corridor. The house elf auxiliary had been ordered by Dobby himself to fall back behind him to the kitchen door in case the engagement went badly. The engagement did not go badly. Dobby ducked the first curse, which was Macnair's. He returned a curse of his own, which he had not learned at any school and which had been taught to him over the previous winter by an interested observer named Hermione Granger, who had spent her own afternoons in the cooperative library learning a small selection of house elf-friendly defensive magics from the books Kari Njadaka had imported from Wakanda. The curse Dobby returned was a Wakandan stunning hex which, contrary to the British stunning hex, did not require a wand and did not require the caster to be of significant magical mass. It required only an intention and a focus, and Dobby had both. The hex hit Macnair in the chest. Macnair dropped. Avery raised his own wand. Avery had time to begin a syllable. Dobby had thrown the vibranium knife. The knife struck Avery in the wand arm at the elbow. Avery dropped the wand. Avery dropped also after a moment because Dobby had also kicked him in the kneecap on the way past with a small slipper-shod foot reinforced by a strip of vibranium taped to the toe by Inca before the engagement. Rookwood, who was the youngest and the fastest, attempted to apparate. Rookwood discovered in the half-second of his attempted apparition that the Wakandan engineers had laid down an anti-apparition field over the entirety of the castle's lower passages 36 hours before. Rookwood's apparition failed. Rookwood was still where he had been. Rookwood turned instead to run. Dobby followed. Dobby caught Rookwood in the corridor by the storage cupboard. Dobby took Rookwood down in the technical sense of bringing his body to the floor by leaping onto his back, biting his shoulder, and using the leverage of his own falling weight to topple the man. Rookwood hit the flagstones. Dobby retrieved the kitchen knife, which he had recovered from Avery's arm in passing, and laid it against Rookwood's throat. "Surrender," Dobby said, "or Dobby is making the master surrender by means he is not enjoying." Rookwood surrendered. The 3 Death Eaters were dragged to the kitchen door by the house elf auxiliary, and bound there with kitchen twine until the Aurors could collect them, which they did at minute 2:11, with the deeply professional politeness of Auror officers who had been instructed in advance by the boy himself that the house elves of Hogwarts were that day to be addressed as officers of the field and accorded the courtesies thereof. Tonks, leading the Auror detail, saluted Dobby. Dobby saluted Tonks back. Tonks, who would later become one of the founding deputy directors of the joint Anglo-Wakandan Magical Security Service, would tell this story on certain occasions, with the great unforced laughter of a witch who had been there, and would always conclude it by saying that the most fearsome combatant on the field that morning had stood 30 inches tall, had worn a tea towel under his vibranium plate, and had taken 3 Death Eaters with 1 knife, 2 slippers, and a vocabulary of grammatically inventive English. The boy would, in his 16th year, in private, design and commission a small bronze statue of Dobby in the act of throwing the kitchen knife. The statue would be installed, by Dobby's modest reluctant consent, in the courtyard of the House Elf Persons Memorial Building in Hogsmeade in the year 2000, with a small plaque underneath in the script of the Golden Tribe and a translation underneath in English, which read simply, "A free person, a captain, a friend." After the battle in the late afternoon, when the dragonflies had finished the medical evacuation, and the engineers had begun the slow work of dismantling the perimeter halo, and the British Aurors had begun the slow work of cataloguing the captured Death Eaters, and the Hogwarts elves had begun the slow work of cleaning the Great Hall, and the boy and his father had walked together once around the lake in silence, the boy and his father returned to the Great Hall for the closing council. The closing council was a meeting of the principals. The head mistress-to-be McGonagall presided. The headmaster Dumbledore sat at her left, gracefully seating the chair. Madame Maxime represented Beauxbatons. Karkaroff had fled in the third hour and was, at that moment, being pursued by a Wakandan dragonfly across the channel. He would be apprehended in Calais by sundown and turned over to the French magical authorities for the long unfinished business of his Death Eater past. Madame Bones represented the Ministry. Tonks represented the Aurors. Captain Accoy represented the Dora Milaje. The engineer-in-chief, a woman named Nakia who had been Erik's friend since they were both 10 years old in Bernanzana, represented the research division. Zuri represented the priests of Bast. Sirius Black represented the office of the Godfather, which was not a formal role but which he had that day earned a place on the council for. The boy represented himself, the office of emissary, and Kethu Njadaka, his small sister, who was at that moment in the embassy in London with her mother and would, by the time the council ended, be teething. The closing council went for 96 minutes. The agenda was simple: the disposition of prisoners, the reconstruction of the school, the restructuring of the Anglo-Wakandan diplomatic relationship in the wake of the joint operation, the drafting of a public statement by McGonagall and Erik jointly, to be issued the next morning to the international wizarding press, the plans for the new compulsory comparative magical civics curriculum, the matter of the Dementors, which had been confirmed to be moving south and which the council agreed would need to be neutralized by joint Anglo-Wakandan operations over the next 18 months. The matter of the future of the Order of the Phoenix, which Sirius proposed should be reconstituted, with the Wakandan ambassador as a standing member, as a permanent advisory body to the British Ministry on matters of dark magical security. The matter of the boys' continued education. On the matter of the boys' continued education, the council was briefly uncertain. The boy was, after all, 15. The boy had, with his father's army, just defeated the most powerful dark wizard in living memory. The boy had 2 years remaining at Hogwarts. The council was divided on whether the 2 remaining years were necessary, given everything else the boy already represented. The boy answered the question himself. "I will complete my education," the boy said. "I will sit my NEWTS. I will graduate from Hogwarts with my class. I will then attend the Wakandan Institute of Magical Sciences, which has not yet been founded, but which my cousin Shuri and I have been designing for 2 years, and which will open its doors in the year of my graduation. I will study there for 3 more years, then take a posting in my father's diplomatic service. I am 15, I am not yet finished. The work that comes next requires me to be a finished man. The finishing is the school." The council accepted this. Erik watched his son. Erik permitted himself in that final hour in the great hall of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, on the 2nd day of May in the year 1996, the small private observation that the boy had outgrown him. The observation was not a mournful one. The observation was, in fact, the observation Erik had been working toward for a decade. The observation was the project's success. Erik leaned over to the boy. Erik said in Kosa in a voice only the boy heard, "Sawubona, my son, Sawubona, my king-in-waiting." The boy said in Kosa, "Sawubona, Baba Yibo, Sawubona." The council adjourned. They went home. After the war, in the long quiet of late May and June of the year 1996, several quiet things happened that did not, in their own moments, seem to matter, and which would, in due course, matter more than the battle itself. The first was that T'Challa, returning from Marseille with an engineering degree and 4 years of continental humility, took Erik's outstretched hand on the steps of the Palace of the Golden Tribe and asked, in front of every minister of every tribe and the entire press corps of 3 African nations, to be allowed to serve as his cousin's chief of staff in the rebuilding of the country he had once expected to inherit. Erik did not give him the chief of staff post. Erik gave him instead the new ministry that had been created for the purpose of running Wakanda's external engagement with the diaspora, a ministry that had not existed in any previous administration and that would be in the years to come, the single most important office in any African government in the world. T'Challa accepted. T'Challa wept on the steps of the palace. T'Challa took the office. T'Challa would hold it for 13 years. The second was that Sirius Black, after some persuasion from his godson and rather less from his old school friend Remus Lupin, accepted a permanent appointment as the Wakandan ambassador to the British Wizarding Press. He took up residence in a small townhouse in Bloomsbury that had been quietly purchased through the embassy. He wrote a column for the Daily Prophet on Tuesdays, and a column for the Wakandan-funded magical paper The Diaspora Quill on Saturdays. He learned slowly to be present in the world again without the Dementor-thinned hollowness that had marked his first year out of Azkaban. He never married. He never had children. He maintained, until the end of his life in 2034, a small framed photograph of James Potter on his desk, and another framed photograph larger of Kari Njadaka in his Wakandan emissary's robes at the age of 17, smiling at something off camera. The first photograph he kept out of love. The second he kept because the second photograph, he said in a private letter to Remus in 2001, was proof that the work had not been for nothing. The third was that Hermione Granger, who had graduated from Hogwarts in the year of the war. She was a year ahead of the boy in standard British schooling, but had effectively been the boy's classmate in every meaningful way, accepted a 5-year fellowship at the Wakandan Institute of Magical Sciences, and left for Bernan Zana on the 3rd of August. She would, in due course, become the founding professor of the Institute's first Department of Magical Civil Law, and would, in 2017, return to Britain as the country's first non-pureblood minister of magic. The boy attended her swearing-in. The boy stood at the back of the room and did not speak. The boy, when the new minister at her podium thanked by name those who taught me in my youth that the world I had been given was not the world I had to keep, did not raise his hand or step forward to be identified. The boy understood that some thanks are not for the boy. Some thanks are for the elder the boy will one day be. The fourth was that Kethu Njadaka, the boy's small sister, took her first steps in the king's private garden on the 11th of June, with her brother holding her hands. She fell on the third step. She did not cry. She got up. She tried again. She walked 9 steps that morning, then sat down, then asked her brother for a mango, which her brother gave her. The boy would, decades later, say that the 11th of June was the day he had been happiest in his life. The fifth was that Erik Njadaka, in the small hours of a Tuesday morning in late June in the king's private study on the high tower of the Palace of the Golden Tribe, drafted by hand a document he had been thinking about for 2 years and finally felt ready to write. The document was titled in Xhosa, The Letter to the Future King. It was addressed to the boy. It was not for the boy to read until Erik's death. It was a list of the things Erik had learned in 9 years of being a father about what a father should be. It was 31 pages long. It was tucked into a small vibranium-lined drawer of the king's desk, which only the boy and Erik knew about, and which would, in 2061, when Erik died at the age of 92 of an undramatic stroke in his bed, with Io at his side and Kethu at his feet and Kari Njadaka holding his hand, be opened by the boy at last, and read slowly over the next 3 days in the king's private study, while his own son, born to the boy and a witch named Akasua, whom the boy had met at a Wakandan Ganyan engineering conference in 2008, kept the cabinet meetings deferred and the household quiet. The first paragraph of the letter said, "Kari, my son, if you are reading this, I am dead. If I am dead, I am not sorry. I had a long life. The life was not the life I expected to have. The life I expected was a short, violent one. The life I had was a long, full one. The reason for the change was you. Before you came, I was a contract. After you came, I was a country. You did not change me. You allowed me to be changed. The work of fatherhood is to allow. I will explain in the next paragraphs what I mean." The 31 pages explained. But that was in 2061. In 1996, on a Tuesday morning in late June in the king's private study, Erik finished the first draft of the letter at 4 in the morning, set down his pen, leaned back in his chair, and looked out the window. The river of Wakanda was beginning to catch the first light of the day. The light was copper. The country was humming. Erik's son was asleep 2 floors below in the king's heir's chamber with the small vibranium-lined diary the boy had been keeping since he was 9 open on the nightstand beside him. The boy had written that night in Xhosa 3 sentences. The war is over. The work is not. The work will never be. Erik read the sentences by means of the small Kimoyo channel that the boy had, with his own permission and at his father's request, kept open between his diary and his father's study for emergencies and quiet readings. Erik read them. Erik set down the Kimoyo. Erik smiled. "Yibo, my son," Erik said softly, "to the river, to the city, to the country, to the dawn. Yibo sawubona." He went to bed. The country went on.